All right, team, welcome to the 7:13 school board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call it to order. Thank you so much for being here. So today we're going to have the invocation by Pastor Jim Brook from Kissimmee Christian Church. The Pledge of Allegiance will be done by Mike Horner, OLEG representative from Macy Island, Inc. Our mission statement will be read by Jim Hickey from principal of Harmony High School, and our translation services will be read by Dr. Janet Long, coordinator for multicultural. So let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Or actually, I'm sorry, Pastor. I think we have the pastor first.
I think we have the right
Thank
priority.
you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, would you bow with me and let's ask God's divine wisdom on our meeting tonight. Our Father in heaven, we come to you because our founding fathers knew you could not establish a republic. You can't even establish a business without divine intervention. And so we seek your wisdom, guidance, and direction tonight. I thank you for the men and women who have availed themselves to lead the Osceola County school system, our families and our children here. We pray, God, tonight that you would grant them wisdom. We are aware of our surroundings, Lord. We know that there is a plea for freedom going on south of Florida right now. And we feel that because so many folks in the United States are from Cuba and they want freedom. And I pray, God, that in our lifetime, we can see that. We can see that. And I pray that we never replicate the effects of socialism here in this great republic we call the United States. Now, Father, I know that as we end the summer and embark on a new school year, there are some challenges that the school board, principals, school teachers, students, parents are going to face. We're celebrating in some ways the life after COVID, but we know it's not gone, and we know there's still challenges. But I pray, Father, that normality can come back, and football games and events that we lost over the last year and a half can come back, and that you will free us of this, and that we will balance our decisions on how we deal with this issue through your lens, because we need your help, because we can't do it alone. That's our prayer, Father. In Jesus' most precious name, amen.
You'll join me in honoring our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The mission statement for SDOC is inspiring all learners to reach the highest potential as responsible and productive citizens.
Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Dr. Janet Long and I'm here for translation services. Buenas noches. Soy la doctora Long y si necesitan servicios de traducción estoy aquí en equipo.
Thank you, everybody who participated in the opening of the meeting. Now is the time in our meeting when we want to focus ourselves and start with positive comments. So I'll go ahead and start over to my right, Dr. Pace.
We're just so glad to have everybody here with us tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Bass?
Tanya's next. You want something? Well, thank everyone for coming. It's going to be nice to not sound like Charlie Brown's teacher talking about this mask anymore. It's really nice to see all the bright, shining faces. You know, I always start off thanking our teachers, and I hope they're having such a great break. But digging a little bit deeper, you know, we have 941 employees in this school district with 20 years or more of service. And what a commitment that must be to have that, you know, almost 1,000 employees with that much service. Some of them have 30, 35 years. So I want to thank all of you for all of your support as well. It means a lot to me. It's been a busy week for me. My garage looks like a Sam's warehouse because we're getting all my stuff ready for my daughter to ship her off to college. And my odds are going up a little bit better now with one less female in the house, but I'm going to miss her. My goal was to, you know, as I'm coming off of Harmony Booster Club, I saw how well we did there, and I wanted to expand that. So today we had a great meeting at Topeka High School. We had about 13 in attendance, some ambitious young people, and not just young people, young and old people too, looking forward to start their booster program. And we've got some really great ideas, so I'm looking forward to working with them. And same way with St. Cloud High School Booster, met with them today as well. So coming together, we're going to raise a lot of money this year for those schools. Tomorrow, our Boys and Girls Club Committee, because that's another one of my goals for the year, is to try to create a Boys and Girls Club for St. Cloud. And our committee is going to be touring one of our, we've narrowed it down to 4 sites, and one of the sites is in St. Cloud, and it's actually owned by the school district. And so we're hoping that'll work. It's right now it's used as storage building, but I'm hoping that we can expand that. What else I was going to say? The young gentleman who gave us the nice presentations about the electric school buses. I was thinking about him today because I read where the president's infrastructure bill is going to dedicate $7.5 billion towards electric school buses. So if we could pass that on to him, I would really appreciate that.
They have a salesperson already.
Yeah. And I just want to thank, I'm looking forward to starting this next school year with a clean slate and everyone in their seats. And my own motto is we're paving our way to an A. That's going to be my credo for the year because I know we can do it. And when I look around this room, we've got the leadership and the educators. I would put this district against any district in the state. And I'm very humbled by the knowledge that I have sitting around me because we got 200 and 300 years of collective educational service and you're busy without a school board. But you still take time out of your day whenever I call and I ask a lot of dumb questions. You always call, you always respond, and you walk me through everything, and I greatly, greatly appreciate that. So thank all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Sorry.
Mr. Arguello?
Yeah, Pastor Brooke, I'm Catholic, but I have to admit that I very often, head to your place on Sundays just to get a great sermon from you on Sundays. So you're a tremendous pastor, and I'm super happy to see you on the agenda delivering the invocation tonight. I'd like to say God bless the people of Cuba. I pray and hope that their fight earns them the liberty that they so desperately seek. I am with you, and situations like these remind me of a statement that was written by Jefferson to a friend of his. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And I'm truly praying for change in Cuba. As someone who has seen the best of our nation spill blood on the battlefields that our country has participated in, I truly hope that there's some light at the end of the tunnel for that nation. I would also, is Nelisa, are you here? Are you okay? So Nelisa Council here started an organization called Love Makes Me Grow. Not only is she teaching kids something that lasts a lifetime through teaching kids to plant their own food, but she also used our students to help development of the program and the organization through their artwork, their participation, and all the creative aspects of and business aspects of creating an organization, a nonprofit. So I just, it's a little bit late. I wish it was in the school year. I wish I could have celebrated you when the kids were working on your project, but I have to commend you. You have done a tremendous job. You're doing tremendous work. Ms. Council is looking for a place to put her organization, and Ms. Council, I'll tell you, I will help you to whatever degree I can to help you find a place where we can put an organization as great as yours, find it a home, and allow it to help as many people as possible in our community. I thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Lastly, I'd like to thank the Trust, Transparency, and Good Governance Committee for our last meeting. There was a great amount of dialogue. It is great work and it is necessary. The number one thing that any government organization needs to create in order to be effective is confidence and trust from its community, and that task force is working towards that. So thank you, all of you, very much, and that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Arguello. I will just end by echoing some of the positive comments from the board. It's always great to start the meeting on a positive note, especially since we have tons of work to do. So thank you so much for your input. I think we have a presentation now from our legislative session. And do we have folks that are on WebEx?
I was just gonna let you know, I think they're supposed to be on at 5:45. So if
Perfect.
you'd like, I could start until we know that they're on, or however you wanna proceed.
Board?
I think that would be great.
Yeah, let's do it.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm Jessica Janasiewicz with Rutledge Ascinia, and I'm just gonna give you a little rundown about the 2021 session and our work this year. you here. So there were over 3,000 bills filed. That is a pretty common number. We usually see somewhere in the 2,000, 3,000 range. And of that number, only 275 made it all the way through the process. I know that sounds dramatically low, but that's actually fairly common as well. What is uncommon is this year, more than 40 of them will impact public education. This is probably the largest number of policies that I've seen passed in 1 year. And that was a little surprising to us as we went into the session thinking perhaps it might just be a smaller year because of the pandemic and the response to that, but we did actually have a lot of substantial policy. So I'll say that all with the note that this is not going to be a completely comprehensive report or we'd be here all night, but we did send you all a report at the end of session with all of the bills that details all the bills. So all that information is in there, as well as a detailed budget report that you can refer to. And of course, we're here for any questions if you have any. So I'll start with your priorities. This year you identified 3 priorities for us to focus on. The first was obtaining waivers based on some of the impacts of the pandemic. That was actually ultimately handled with the executive branch. We did meet with folks from the Department of Education and the governor's office, as well as House and Senate members, because at one point it wasn't very clear as to how it was going to be handled. There was a bill that would have taken care of those waivers, and so we certainly advocated for that. But then ultimately the commissioner took action and did an executive order that took care of those waivers. But that was definitely a positive thing, I know a welcome thing for our schools. Also, we focused on the compression adjustment because that is something that has benefited the district every year. This year it was a little more than $5 million for Osceola County. You guys got the second largest amount, only behind Polk County, and they have considerably more students. So it's definitely a benefit to the district. It provides that extra money that you all can decide what to do instead of some of the dollars we know come down with requirements. This is for you to use as you see fit. It has been a year-to-year effort, so it is not recurring dollars, which is why we have to go back every year and ask and advocate for it. And certainly there was a little concern at the beginning of the session when obviously we knew Florida's budget had taken a hit. We are sales tax based, and when things shut down, it was looking a little bleak there, and so we were concerned that that might be an area where we had some trouble, but thankfully we were able to secure that. Additionally, we were focused on maintaining the current DCD. You probably recall last year, there was an effort to make a major change to that formula. It would have had a very negative impact on Osceola County. There's always, that is kind of going to be a constant battle, to be honest with you, because there are districts that feel that they do not receive the dollars that they should under that formula, and so there's always an effort to change it. So we're always looking to make sure if there are any proposed changes, that they are not changes that will hurt your district. And then lastly, this wasn't one of the priorities, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's something that came up, I'm sure, quite a bit in your meetings with parents. There were the proposed changes to the Bright Futures Scholarship Program. It had a couple iterations, but it would have really limited the program for some students, and I know there was a lot of concern amongst parents. That's something that when they're planning for their students, they certainly want to know that that program is there. So that did not pass this year. That is something that we will keep an eye on moving forward as well, if that continues to be a priority for you all, because I will tell you that program continues to grow. And it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. It started rather small, it grew, then the legislature took some action to contract it just a little bit, and it's kind of back in a growth mode. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it costs money. And so in addition to what we normally see from the lottery funds, the legislature has had to add additional dollars in the last couple of years. So the tune of, I believe it's $200 million or so. So pretty substantial money. So that's something that we want to keep an eye on as well, particularly if we get into a year where we have, a budget constraints of some kind or another, if we have anything with the economy not doing as well as thankfully it seems to be now. But those were our wins. So all 3 of the priorities this year we were pleased to see did pass. Let's see if it moves on. Oh, there we go. There were some bills I wanted to mention that died because when I say that 40 bills impacted public education, it seems like, oh my goodness, did all of them pass? And a lot of them did, but there were some that did not pass. There was a bill that would have made changes, particularly to the way the teachers union operates with the school district. That bill did not pass. there were proposed changes to the Florida retirement system. It would have closed the defined benefit program to new hires starting in July of 2022. That bill did not pass. That is another issue that we've seen over the years that continues to come back in one form or fashion. It's not always the same proposals, but that did not pass this year. I mentioned obviously Bright Futures, and then there was the school board salaries, which then transitioned into term limits. That bill did not pass either, and that was something that was up until the very last moment. There were attempts to get that into some legislation, so even though the standalone bill kind of stalled at the last minute, they always try to stick things certain places, but that did ultimately not pass this year. We did have a few major topics, and I'll watch my time. Are we good?
I'm texting to find out.
Okay, well, you just tell me, I'll keep going until you tell me if he's on the phone, because we don't want to make a senator wait, that's for sure. We have a couple major topics, obviously.
No, sounds like would be
Senator Broxton?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we sure can.
Hello?
Thank you, Senator Broxton. Hold on one moment.
Chairman, can you hear us?
I can hear you perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking time to call in. We appreciate it. Love to turn the floor over to you for a minute to maybe give us some highlights from this last session and a preview of what we're looking at for next session.
Well, you know, this year was very complicated because the student count from last year, we had to kind of recalibrate it, and I think the commissioner did the right thing and did a hold harmless for the school districts. So we felt like each district would be in pretty good shape as far as not being penalized for students not showing up. So this coming year, hopefully we'll get back to somewhat normal. We know the schools probably will have some resources from the second part of the stimulus that came from the Fed, so we're hoping they're using that properly. But in all, we're hoping to get back somewhat where we were prior to COVID next year.
And just, I probably didn't give you enough of an introduction when we started. So Senator Broxton is the chairman of the K-12 Appropriations Committee. So he's the guy in charge of funding our school districts, which is kind of important to us here. I know something that's important to this district is the compression allocation. And you played a big role in making sure that got funded this year. I didn't know if you had some comments on your thoughts about compression moving forward.
Well, you know, in all frankness, prior to being the chairman of the committee, I did not realize that we were in jeopardy, both in my county and in Osceola, of losing the compression credit. And I have to give my good friend Mike Horner credit for giving me the language to go to the chairman of the education committee and explain how important that was to us, and we were able to say it really very, very late in session. So I don't think compression, I believe that both Osceola and Santa Rosa did very well this year. I don't see the pressure for us to discontinue that. Unless there's something, and I do have a couple of staff people on here. Now, are we, the meeting that we're on with the board, is this attended by constituents, or is this a board meeting, just a conference call, or tell me the format, because they're very careful to go into policy that would not be vetted by either me or someone else, so I want to make sure I keep them clear.
You have the whole school board, and we'll probably let them ask some questions in a moment. You've got the whole school board, and you do have constituents from Osceola County in the audience as well.
Okay, that's fine. Well, we'll do the best we can.
Any questions from the board for Senator Broxton?
I do have a comment. Senator Broxton, this is John Arguello from District 3. I just wanted to thank you. You actually provided me with a very nice courtesy and surprise. I was testifying before the Senate this past term, and you sent me a letter saying thank you and so on, and after a little scuffle that I had with Senator Thurston. So I appreciate that, and hopefully I can repay the graciousness that you sent my way.
Those are the kind of questions that legislators love. Sorry, didn't mean to catch up.
I remember your comment. I remember how articulate and how straightforward you were. frankly, I'm a little concerned. I spoke to the Superintendent Association last month about maybe the legislature giving a protocol on how to run your meetings. I know that across the state, we've had some pretty contentious meetings to the point in my district where safety was an issue. And I don't think that's what we should allow for people that are volunteering to serve like you are. I know there are some tough issues that we're going through, a lot of social issues, a lot of misconceptions, things that are said that are really not correct. And where you have to defend the negative is always a challenge, and it should not be something that should impair your safety. So we're looking at some legislation on how maybe people that can't control their behavior put into a Zoom room, or not let them be part to riot, to create applause and other things that disturb the meeting. So I don't know if you've had any of those issues, but I know we have had it in other jurisdictions around the state.
We're good so far.
Good. Any other questions from board?
Yeah, Chairman, I have a unique question that I haven't really vetted with the board, but since I have you, it just kind of came up to me. I know we have a Safe Schools allocation that we can use for like the SRO program or the SSO, however we choose to comply with the Marjorie Stoneman Act. Is there a possibility, and I'm just kind of throwing out there in the wind, that there's different traffic fines or fines, whatever, a student gets juvenile detention or community service may have to pay a fine. Is there a way that maybe we can actually augment some of those school safety funds by collecting a percentage of that to fund that allocation directly? Because I'm not exactly sure how school safety funds get, if it just gets it from general revenue and you guys put it in pure FEFP, or can we actually augment that with some monies from somewhere in the criminal detention system or juvenile justice system somewhere where, like when you get a ticket, part of the monies go to different things. Can some of that augment the school safety so that way we can provide better coverage at all of our schools?
Well, frankly, I think that would be something we want to take up with the commissioner and make it part of the recommendation for the 67 counties. It's a very complicated process, but anything's possible. You can talk to your local senator or representative and kind of explain it to them and see if they want to put it in the form of a bill or an amendment to a bill, and that's how it would be considered. I don't think as a committee we would volunteer to try to make that suggestion. We want it to come from a member or from the commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator, if you wanted to talk maybe a little about the district cost differential, I know that is one of this board's big priorities, and that was kind of under siege, not so much this session, but in the 2020 session. I know you weighed in on that. Any thoughts about the DCD moving forward?
Not really. We haven't received much complaint. We think we've got the formula pretty tight, and that the districts that need an adjustment, we've done that. I think all in all, we've had in a very difficult year with a lot of concerns from parents and from educators. We've tried to thread the needle, and we've done the best we can. We do better, but we want to certainly have the input of the school boards and superintendents to make sure that we get it right.
Before we let you go, we've got you for about 4 more minutes. Any preview for next year that this board ought to be thinking about, issues that you see coming up, funding or otherwise, in education?
Well, I think, again, I think you're still looking at some holdbacks from the commissioner on programs that either he's approved and he's releasing the money as he sees the programs go into effect. But as I said early on, I believe next year will be a year where we try to get back to what we consider to be somewhat normal, and work with the House and the governor and making sure that we do a good job in letting our students get a good education and keep Florida moving in the right direction.
Well, I appreciate it. Any other questions from the board before we let the chairman go about his day?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman, for all your help. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chairman
Well, thank you, sir. Y'all have a great day, and thank you for your service. Don't think people realize what it takes to serve today, and I want to thank the public who are listening to make sure that you stay involved, because these issues are very important to you and around the state.
Thank you, Chairman, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think I heard a click go off. Chairman Latval, are you on the line now? Maybe that was my imagination.
Oh, hey, I'm here. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you, sir, for calling in. We appreciate it. So just to set the table, Chairman Latvala chairs the Education Committee in the Florida House, and he actually came down and visited with our board 2 years ago, prior to session, when he was the K-12 approach chair. So he had Senator Broxton's job in the House last cycle, and now Chairman Latval is basically in charge of all the education policy in the House. So Chairman, basically, if you wanted to talk a little bit about what happened in this previous session and maybe your thoughts moving forward, and we'll let the board ask you some questions if that's okay.
Sure. It's good to at least hear you, Mike. Mike's a longtime friend, and I don't believe I've ever had a conversation with him, even a personal, non-political conversation in which he does not mention funding compression in some regard. He is, and your whole team in Osceola that y'all have in Tallahassee representing you is doing a wonderful job and looking out for your behalf. My committee scope got changed a little bit this year by the speaker, and now I have education and employment, so everything from pre-K up through the university and college system, and also the workforce. So this year we did some workforce bills that were designed to give some more transparency and accountability to our career source and workforce boards that we have around Florida. And that was in response to some issues that have arisen in the last few years. We also, in the K-12 space, pre-K through 12 space, we had a big focus on literacy, House Bill 3, which was carried by Dana and Tribolosi, will give books to and send books into the homes of struggling and low-income readers. And we're partnering with school districts and nonprofits to get that done. House Bill 5 was a civics bill. Certainly that's been lacking in some regard, the last several years. And what House Bill 5 will do is, educate the students of the dangers of communism, and it's going to be first-person accounts from Floridians who have escaped communist countries, whether it's Cuba, Venezuela, or others. And so we had a big, a big focus this year under Speaker Sproul's, in regards to education. The one thing, as you all know, we started out the session facing a budget deficit. And so I was glad that I was not the education chair, or the education appropriations chair. But then we ended up with $10 billion that we got from the feds. And so the chair of that committee, Randy Fine, did a wonderful job in crafting the K-12 budget. The higher ed budget's overseen by Renee Placencia, who's right down the road from you guys. But in my committee, I'm honored to have a couple freshmen from your neck of the woods, and that is Representative Hawkins and Representative Arrington, both who did a tremendous job on the committee and the work that we did on the committee, whether it was literacy or workforce, some higher ed issues, where we tried to make tuition more affordable for students. But also they did a great job in advocating on behalf of Osceola County. So they're both bright rising stars in the Florida House who will have a successful career in the Florida House long after I'm gone. But I do want to hear, I know that CDC is something that comes up every year, as well as, funding compression and looking out for counties such as Osceola. And, but I do want to hear from questions that y'all may have.
Questions from the board members? The chairman. They may have exhausted all the questions. If you could, Chairman, maybe you could talk a little bit about the district cost differential. I know that was an issue that you kind of carried year before last and is a bit of a mess that at some point is going to need to be cleaned up. If you wanted to maybe talk about its prospects in the future.
Yeah, and that is, thankfully for me, that's more on the appropriation side. And Randy Fine, under his purview. But that's just something that, was, especially under Speaker Oliva, was something that we tried to do. And weren't able to get it done and try to bring some, equality and how we do the funding, to various counties. And the DCD was brought about to help the, situation that was caused by the funding compression.
Right.
This year I didn't work too much on it because I was doing a lot of the, policy side stuff. But next year, we're looking for things to do, and that certainly is, a possibility.
Any other thoughts before we let you go on what will be the hot topics as we go into next year's session, things that this board ought to be aware of?
Well, I think, certainly critical race theory is something that, is a concern of myself and many others in my chamber. And, despite the, governor's recent order, I do think that there are, some counties that, maybe change the words around, but keep the meaning the same. And whenever I speak of those counties, I'm not referring to Osceola because I'm not aware of any issues in Osceola. But I think that's going to be something that, we take a look at. Certainly, the teacher shortage might be something that is looked at. And it's kind of in a, wait and see mode, and hopefully, I caught the tail end of Senator Broxton's talk, but hopefully this coming year will be a normal year where kids are in the classroom and they don't have to learn from their kitchen table unless that's what their parents prefer.
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate it that you took time, and I really appreciate that you always have your door open for Osceola County and looking out for us during the session. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely, and it's good talking to you all, and if I can ever be of assistance, please feel free to reach out. And Mike, it was good talking to you, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it, Chairman.
Thank you.
So one other thing before I turn it back over to Jessica, while we were talking, I got a text from Representative Darren Soto, and something that we brought to the school district's attention is that they're bringing earmarks, for better or for worse, they're bringing earmarks back to Congress, and the congressman got to have 10 that he put in, and he put in one for the Osceola School District. And he let me know the school district of Osceola County's request for $461,000 for New York City's solar project made it in the House budget. Just calling to give you the good news. He said, "Isn't there a board meeting tonight?" I said, "Yes, it's perfect timing." So I didn't plan that, he just texted at 5:45, so that's good news. Anyway, I wish I was that clever and I planned it. Great. Okay, Jessica, if you want to finish your presentation, thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, we began the session and the focus was the pandemic. We had a number of pieces of legislation that addressed that. The first, of course, was the accountability waivers that I already mentioned. But there was a bill, Senate Bill 72, that was passed very early in session that provided liability protections. School districts were part of that. It was also included business entities and things like that, but we were included in that. There was also language about retaining students just for this year, and this is actually something that only went through June 30th, the ability to apply for this, so it doesn't really impact you all now, but prior to June 30th, if a parent made a request to a principal and they sat down and had the whole discussion, but ultimately the parent felt that their child should be retained in a K-5 student, that had to be respected, and we had to retain the child for this year. That is no longer in effect because it's past June 30th. And then lastly, they did add more dollars into the mental health allocation with the idea that hopefully you can use some of those monies to address some of the needs that we know our students and families have that have gone through trauma during this year of just incredible upheaval. So another major topic, as Representative Latvala mentioned, was early learning. And we saw a number of bills. Some of these have been around for a couple of years and just haven't made it to the finish line that did pass this year. And some of these were new ideas. The first, House Bill 7011, does quite a bit in the early learning literacy space. As Representative Latvala said, that is something that the speaker really wanted to focus on. Essentially, it takes the state and it breaks it into 20 different regions. Each region will have literacy supports, so a literacy expert as well as a team that will go into the schools and support those students who are struggling with their early literacy skills. That will be identified in a couple of ways. The major way will be using a progress monitoring system. So right now, all of our districts have some form of a progress monitoring system. There was a desire from the legislature to make that uniform so that there's one progress monitoring system that's being used throughout the state so you can compare, apples to apples, if you will. So that is something that the state will be working on this year. That's their first task, is identifying what that system is going to be. It was funded. So the good news is it's not something you have to pay for. The legislature did fund that with the bill, but they will have that progress monitoring system, and then those teams and the regions will all go into place next year. So this is kind of the planning year, if you will, the time for the department to do their work on progress monitoring and finding all of those literacy experts to support the schools. And then those folks will go into school, they'll use that data from the progress monitoring system, as well as if there is any standardized assessment data for those students, depending on their age, to try to help and support their early learning. And the progress monitoring system, I should mention, is K-8. So it does go beyond elementary school. Then we had another bill, House Bill 419, which really overhauled our early learning system. And essentially what it did is it creates an accountability system for our VPK program. So there's been a lot of debate and discussion about that over the years. Obviously, the vast majority of them are private providers, but we do have VPK programs in our schools, so this will impact our VPK programs. They essentially have created a metric that they want to be used that looks at everything from actual assessment data, and I say that with quotes. It's not quite what we think of when we think of the FSA, but something that's more age appropriate for young students, as well as observational data. And then there will be some sort of score or label given, and it hasn't been determined yet. They did say it won't be a grade, but it'll be something like that when we think about our school grades that these VPK programs will get, so that parents can look when they're deciding on a VPK provider and they can say, this one got this score, this one got this score, where do I want to send my child? That's essentially what that bill does. The bill also had a requirement for a progress monitoring system, but it was only K-3, and so what the legislature did is they just funded the one in the other bill that is K-8, so it's a larger progress monitoring system. And then lastly, I think Representative Latvala mentioned this as well, the House Bill 3 was the home book delivery bill. This was another priority for the speaker. And essentially, it takes students that are struggling in their early learning years, so K through 5, If they are identified as a struggling reader, their parents can apply for this program and they will receive a book every month until they graduate from 5th grade. So the job for the school district is going to be letting those parents know that that program is available and giving them whatever form the department or whomever creates that lets them apply for that. And then it will be incumbent on them to do that. And then there's going to either be a nonprofit or a university that actually does the whole system of books and getting them out and stuff. So that hopefully won't be as much of a responsibility for the school district, but you will have to let the parents know about that program.
Jessica, may I ask a
Sure,
question about
please.
HB 7011?
Yep.
You mentioned that there was going to be, I guess, regional teams that will be monitoring the progress of the student literacy, is that correct?
Yes.
So, do you know how these team members are going to be selected or how they would be comprised?
No, not yet. The department will be working on that this year, so we'll be sure to share that with you as we get any information from them. I would imagine that they'll have to have some sort of plan to get these folks, and I'm not sure if they might even have individuals that share regions, depending on how many people they can find that are experts in the field that can do this work. But that is a part of what they're doing this year, so I will absolutely let you all know as soon as we get that information.
Wonderful, thank you.
I think Representative Latvala also mentioned the career and technical workforce work that primarily the House did this year, but obviously the Senate accepted it. A lot of this work, as he mentioned, looks at some of the other entities, regional and city and otherwise, that the legislature funds to help folks find jobs and get education for their career. But there are a few things that will impact us, so I'll mention those. First, they created a grant program for school districts if you want to create a short-term, high-need program for students. The grant program would fund 2/3 of that. So that'll be something that you could avail yourselves of if that is something you're interested in. They also created what they're calling a money-back guarantee program, which initially gave us a little bit of pause because we thought, what on earth does this mean? What it does is you will have to identify, depending on how many programs you have. So for our very small districts that have 2 programs that they offer, they won't have to put both of them in the program, they could just choose one. If you offer more, you have to, I think you have to choose up to 3, I believe, that can participate in this program. From there, the student who makes it all the way through the program, if they do not get a job in 6 months, they can come back and ask for their tuition back. But there is a big but that goes with that as well, and that is that they have to fulfill some certain requirements, and you can determine those at the board level, but you can do things like their attendance, did they actually come to class, did they come to any job kind of programs, what were their grades like, did they never show up and never pass anything, so if you set some parameters, that is something you'll be able to do. Just to give you an idea, this was done in Texas, and I think they said in committee during testimony that they've only ever had 1 student that actually came back and met all those requirements and got their tuition back. So it's something certainly that you all can think when you choose those programs, the ones that students really can exit and get a job, your high demand programs will be the ones to choose for that. And so that's what the House really worked on that issue quite a bit. It was a major focus for them, and those were their big bills dealing with that. And then of course, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jessica, were you going to the next pager?
No, whatever you need.
Okay, so with regard, this is a SB 366 you're talking about?
Oh, sorry, that was House Bill 1507.
1507,
And then, sorry.
If I may ask,
Sure,
first of all, I'm sorry to interrupt you because I thought we were done with all of it, so I apologize, but since I'm already talking. With regards to the money back guarantee parameters, do you know if there will be any consideration for the job market itself? For example, if we hit a recession or if there is a specific area that's being affected by whatever the case might be, is that something we can add in?
I believe that would be, because I think you're able to set some reasonable parameters, but I will check that language and let you know for sure. But they were pretty broad in allowing what you all could do when you make your determination. They weren't too prescriptive.
Thank you.
You're welcome, no, I'm sorry. Then we did have 2 school choice bills that passed. The first was House Bill 7045. That was more commonly known as the voucher bill. Essentially, it's quite technical with those programs, because as you know, we had quite a few programs out there. We had some for students with disabilities, some based on need, some that even dealt with bullying in schools. What they did was they essentially collapsed two of those voucher programs, two of the disability voucher programs, took the names off of them, put them in to the empowerment program, which is the needs-based program. So they're kind of all together in one lump. Now, nothing changed about the requirements. So the students with disabilities will still be able to apply for those vouchers. And the students who have the need in their family can still apply for those vouchers. They just put them all together and also put it in the FEFP. So it made it a little more complicated as to where it all went, but nothing really changed technically with those programs, with the exception of there was an expansion there. So for the disability scholarship program, they added disabilities that would qualify. For the program that looks at needs, they changed the income requirements, and it took it to, I think it's 375%, 325% of the poverty level. So it increased, essentially, just the way to think about it is the number of kids that can apply for these programs and where that money goes.
Now, which one is the Hope Scholarship? Did that get collapsed into it? Because I actually had to buy a new car today, and it said you want to designate $150 of the purchase to go to that scholarship.
Yes,
Is
yes,
that separate?
that's still there. They're all just kind of together now. They were trying to, because there were so many out there, they were trying to streamline it to some extent, but that does still exist, yes. So that ability, when you buy a car, if you want to, give to that, you can, and then parents can still avail themselves of that as well. And then the second was a charter bill, and I know you all have charters here in the district that you work with. This deals a lot with the application process and some of the appeals process. So your staff here that works with charters will really want to take a look at that bill, but that's essentially what that did, was looking at a lot of how they apply, when they apply, how many applications they can have at a time, that kind of thing. But both of those bills passed as well. And then budget-wise, there was a couple major issues, and as I said, we had a pretty technical report that we sent to you all that details exactly the impacts of the budget on Osceola. But just to give you an idea, we did have to look at, as Senator Broxton said, the student counts. So this year, we were held harmless, given the pandemic, which was a real blessing, I think we can all say. But next year, really the year you're in currently now, does look at your actual student counts. Now, I will say you all have done an exceptional job looking at other school districts across the state. There are some that are still really down in their student numbers, and there's a lot of concern there because that will obviously have a major impact on the budget. You all have done a really good job of retaining and getting your students back, which is amazing. But that is something to keep in mind. Obviously, the compression adjustment, which I think you said 20 times now, but that was included in the budget, so that was an additional $5 million plus dollars. And then also, as Representative Latvala mentioned, the federal dollars. So I know you all have been working at the district, the superintendent and staff, on your plan for how you're going to spend those dollars. Obviously, there's a lot of money there, and so a lot of planning has to go into that, but hopefully those monies will help serve those students who have really struggled or have even not been in school or not been in the level of school that we want on a regular basis. So that made the budget, as Representative Latvala said, a lot better and a lot less bleak than it was looking at the very beginning of session. As we look forward to the next session, this year is an early session. It's an election year in 2022, and so we are having committee weeks start actually in September. So you can see there the schedule. We have one in September, 2 in October, 2 in November, and then on January 11th, session will start. And theoretically, on March 11th, session will end. Sometimes we end on time, sometimes we don't. This year we actually did. But that's the schedule for this year. So after this year's session, when it ends in March, or whenever it ends, they will not return until after the election. Because of course we have House members and some of our senators that are up for election, so they won't be able to meet until everyone is back in place.
Don't they have to have a special session for redistricting in the odd year though? Because if they wait till January to create session and finalize the maps, Isn't that too late?
There's-
Don't they have to have a special redistricting?
They will have a special session. It's not clear exactly when they're going to do that. I think there's been some delay because there was a delay in the census, thank you. And so that has kind of had a ripple effect for everything until they can actually do the maps. But they will do that, you're right, and that will be separate from the actual legislative session. So as we look forth, as we look forward to the budget this next year, there are some really promising things on the horizon, and it's nice to be able to come here with good news, and some years we come and say it's just all bleak and looking terrible. But we have seen an increase, and I think you all got a report earlier last week from us that talked about how we have seen the tax revenues have actually gone over what they had planned, had forecasted for the last 6 months by a lot, which is great news. Now, of course, that had been adjusted for the pandemic. So we had a forecast that looked good. Once the pandemic happened, they went back and revised the forecast, but we are beating those forecasts every month, which is a promising sign. That means there's hopefully going to be more revenue there to work with. Also, the governor signed the Seminole Compact for gaming. That looks like it's going to be a good amount of money for the state. That is tax revenues that they did not account for this year in the budget because it wasn't in place yet. But so that will hopefully add to the coffers as well. So those are some things that are at least on the horizon that we're hopeful about. Of course, just like March of 2020 when everything changed overnight, things can change. But right now, we're looking at a pretty promising budget, I would say, for the next year. As I mentioned, committee weeks will begin in September, so we expect to see the governor's budget sometime in late November, early December is what that should say, not September. He will submit his recommendations. That's always a good indicator for us as to what his priorities are, what he's going to advocate for. So that gives us a good sense of where he is. Obviously, this legislature works very well with the governor, so when we see his recommendations, that's important for us as we work for you. And then committees will start building the budget in late January and February. That's when that work will begin. And then, as I mentioned, session is slated to end on March 11th. We'll see about that, but we're hopeful. I don't know if we wanted to have a whole discussion about priorities for the upcoming legislative session, or if you all have contemplated when you want to have that discussion, but certainly that's something to kind of keep in our mind since committee weeks do start in September, and we can report back to you all what we're hearing as to what their priorities will be. Senator Broxton has said on multiple occasions that issue about meetings and decorum and that sort of thing being a priority for him. And certainly we know that critical race theory issue is out there. So I would expect to see some language with regard to instructional materials. That's probably where that will come. So just to keep all those things in your mind. Mike, do you want to add anything when it comes to priorities or thoughts that you have?
I would just say that clearly compression is not something we want to lose sight of. It's a year-to-year battle. At some point, maybe we can get and roll it into a base and not have to fight it every year. The DCD, 2 years ago, that was not on our list. It was, I think, Jessica, 2 weeks into session, that popped up, and we kind of had to have all hands on deck. I could give you the blow-by-blow, but it was a tough one. It was a speaker priority. It went through the House. It came down to conference. Was a real fight. And I know extra thanks to Ms. Graver. I know that Jim, Jessica, and Doug and Sarah and I, we all got on the phone, and we were the only county that crafted the response they needed of what would be the alternatives, and we were successful. So you never know what they're going to throw at you during the year, but I think DCD you want to keep. I might also suggest we don't need to finalize it today as much as let's wait and see what FADS and FSBA they come up with, because it's always nice when we kind of work as a team with other districts. But happy to answer questions or talk about next year's priorities.
I got a couple of questions, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Jessica and I know the answer to this. Do you keep track of the bills that you're following and so on? And obviously, I get the updates on a constant basis, and I'm tracking them along with you. Can you describe to me kind of the lobbying process for you guys? You don't have to give me the secret sauce if you don't have one, but just generally speaking.
So it's kind of a multifaceted process. Obviously, the first thing we have to do is have relationships with the senators, the representatives, and the staff. And I mentioned staff because we have term limits in Tallahassee, so the most anyone can be anywhere is 8 years. The staff is there for the long haul, so they have a lot of influence. So that's something that I've tried to curate over time. I know Mike has as well. You have those relationships, so you have folks you can go to and talk to, and that's also important with the department and the governor's office. The last couple governors that we've had have been very involved in education and have had a lot of success working with the legislature. So when they come out with an idea, it's important that you have a relationship there. So that's first and foremost. For me, then it's knowing the issues. So following all of the education bills, understanding them, communicating with you all and your staff to get feedback about the impact on the district. We try our very best to have an idea of what we think would be important, and obviously we know more money good, more money bad, right? But there's lots of nuance with the policy, and so we get with staff, we have them, we say, hey, this looks like this might be trouble. Would this be trouble for you all? And then we take action from there, and we just kind of follow that throughout the whole process. And then when it comes to the budget, obviously, we do that during the legislative session, but we also try, as I hope you've seen, I hope you find them helpful, our revenue estimating reports that we send. That gives us an idea of what the budget's ultimately going to look like. So as we follow it, we say, okay, things are looking good or things are looking dire, and then usually we can come up with a real ballpark, and it's, we can't see the future, but we can come up with a ballpark of, okay, this is what the revenues are looking like, this is what we think the budget's gonna look like, expect a cut this year, or hopefully expect an increase this year. So that's what we do, and we just try to stay on it the entire time, and we have those conversations, not just committee weeks in session, but throughout the summer. That's part of what I do in the summer, is we travel around and meet our members in their home districts. Sometimes, as I'm sure those of you who've met with them, you get a lot more time when they're at home than you do when they're in Tallahassee, because they're very busy. So we get some time and we work through it that way.
What percentage of your process is actually lobbying the individual representatives or senators?
Oh, quite a bit, especially during the committee weeks in session. It's kind of more informal lobbying over the summer when we just know there are some things.
No elevator rides this year, though.
That's gosh, yes, good grief. So this time of year, it's more just if we know there's a priority for you, we might already start mentioning it. But then obviously, that's heavily what we do during the committee weeks in session when we're there. We're pretty much normally, except for this year, in the Capitol all the time. This year it was a lot of Zoom meetings and some other kind of strange stuff, but typically we're there in person.
Mr. Horner, can I ask you the same question? What's your process like, and how much of that process is spent meeting with representatives and senators?
Well, this year it was tricky because of COVID, you couldn't get in the Capitol. So, as Mr. Melendez indicated, much of what you get to do is, that informal, you're running somebody in a meeting, you're running somebody hall, and you didn't have that this year. So it was important to have those pre-existing relationships where you could get those guys on the phone, where you could talk to the chairman of the committee, where you could get a text in. Particularly the Senate was completely locked down. The House, you could get in with an advanced meeting. So this year was less contact with members. Typically, that's the name of the game. It is a member-driven process. And I would say even this year with COVID, I would say during session, there's rarely a day that goes by that I'm not talking to at least one member of our delegation. And usually depends on if there's an issue that's relevant to a chairman that's worth addressing with them.
Do you keep track of your bill numbers and so on?
I keep track of the priorities that this board gives me. So you gave me 3 priorities plus the claims bill issue, which wasn't on our list, but we talked about it and so that was what I track. We try and be abreast of what's going on, so if it's something that creeps up that could hurt Osceola County or could potentially help us, we can jump in and add that issue. But I can tell you, Jessica and Jim and her team, they're 10 times the education experts than I'll ever be. My job is to work on those issues that you assign me to work on, or that during the session the superintendent directs me to do.
We have not been getting the same level of reporting from you that we have from the other people, from the other partners. But most important to me is that last 2 out of 3 years, you weren't registered to lobby with the House, last year specifically. Can you explain that?
I don't know if that's true, but I have to look it up.
I mean, I was looking while we were going through the presentation, I was looking through the list and it doesn't have you registered.
I'd have to look it up. I don't know if that's true.
I mean, to me, that's a pretty big deal, right?
I don't know if that's true. I'd have to look it up.
You don't know whether you registered or not?
I don't know that, I believe I registered, but I'll look it up.
I mean, that's part of,
You can
Jessica, are you
ask the
registered
question
to
over
lobby?
and over, that's my answer.
Jessica, are you registered to lobby? Yes? Is that something that you do every year?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Bruce, are you?
Yes.
And that you do that every year, right?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you back there.
There's no question that you guys are registered to lobby, is there, Jessica, Bruce, Mr.
No,
Bruce?
what, sir? I'm sorry.
There's no question that you're registered to lobby the House.
Oh, no question.
Absolutely. And Jessica, I imagine the same thing, right? Okay, because that to me is particularly disturbing that we may have a lobbyist who's not registered to lobby on our behalf, yet as the chairman Lavela said, you were lobbying him. Can you explain that?
Is that?
I'll look it up, but I know you've asked.
I have to
before.
ask, Frank,
Yes.
I guess I'm interested to know what the point of the conversation is, so, and please educate me, so we have our legislative session update, right? And we have been updated, are you specific, is this a conversation that we need to have right this moment, or is this something that we need to have more information on? I'm trying to understand, like, what's the point of this particular conversation?
To me, it's of particular interest when we talk about trust, transparency, and good governance, that if we are hiring a consultant to do a specific job, they're licensed to do that actual job. Otherwise, it seems like not only are we wasting the money, that Frank, Mr. Krumbacher, is there, what's the legality involved in that situation? If you're not registered to lobby the House of Representatives and you lobby the House of Representatives, what does that mean exactly? Do you know?
Yes, the penalty is on the person who's not registered.
So it's a non-issue for us as a school board, except that it makes us look pretty bad that we have a lobbyist who's lobbying without being registered. Is that correct?
I have a dim view of the legislature, so I don't know that anything they look at, they think is bad, but the reality is it would be raised and the lobbyist would have to deal with the individual issue.
So this is a personal issue, not a
Is that a
board issue.
personal issue?
So just, again, please help me understand
Yes.
so that I'm not,
I think it is a legitimate question that has been asked, is the person we hired to lobby registered to lobby in, there'd really be three questions.
yeah,
You're registered to lobby the governor, the Senate, or the House. I've always known you to register, so I think we need to find out what the glitch is here, if there's a glitch or what's happening.
and so that I don't have my words misconstrued, my question was based on your comment that the district itself is not, there's no liability for us, this is an issue for whomever,
Right.
correct? That was the question I was asking, I wanna make sure that's clear on the record.
Well, I think that whenever we have a contract in place, then this would be definitely an issue. I don't know how this becomes a personal issue. This is certainly a school board issue. When we go through and I pulled the contract this afternoon, and I can go line by line, you can see my form, I've got a lot of highlights here that, in my opinion, I'm no lawyer, but not only is Mr. Horner in breach of the contract that we have here, but not being registered with the House and coming here and presenting in such a fashion to me is highly and extremely inappropriate. The first one, consultant shall provide lobbying services on behalf of the school board's interest and shall provide detailed reports and program evaluations that document such efforts. A detailed performance criteria is attached to this, and if you go through that Exhibit A, none of these are done. So to me, that's exactly the type of thing that this school district, all the pats on the back that we receive, just goes to waste when a situation like this takes place, especially considering when there's relationships involved that go beyond the school district and the board.
I understand. I do wish that I would have had some information about that ahead of time because I thought we were having a legislative update. So it's a little bit of a surprise, but it's okay.
Can I make a
Yeah, can we
recommendation?
talk about,
Since Mr. Warner said he wants to go back and look at everything, could this be assigned to Dr. Pace and I to look into and report back to the board?
Yeah, I think we should move on. I don't want to spend all
As to the
night
scope of
on
what
the
you
issue.
brought up.
Is it for clarity purposes, because I think the Senate doesn't have like a database where you log in, but the House of Representatives has it where you can type in the lobbyists and you'll get the bills. And are you saying that when you type in Mike Warner's name, you don't see any bills associated with him?
Maybe I'm doing it
as far as
wrong, but
registering
if
with-
you go right now and you do it,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that, so that's what we're looking at, so Superintendent, I think that's what we're hearing, that, you know, if you type in his name, will he generate anything? And then also do the same thing with Rutledge Yesenia, type in their name and see if they get
I
a list
did,
of
and they come up.
bills. No, I'm just,
Yeah.
I don't know what you did, John.
I know,
You don't coordinate, you know what I mean? I
I'm
don't know
just
what
telling
you're
you,
talking about.
I'm
just telling
letting
I
you
know
bring
the
that up
process,
because I
you
did
know what I mean?
actually,
But I'm just saying, but that's something I would like the superintendent to look at, and then that way you can confirm to us whether or not he is in breach, because I can't make assumptions based on something I don't know.
I
So-
am looking at
Yeah.
the state's 2020 lobbyist thing. And the state's got all sorts of, just so you know, I'm always like going to 9 different sites, getting different thoughts. Because this one says yes, this one says no. It appears Mr. Horner is registered to represent, to lobby the House and Senate. He's registered to lobby one chamber and or the public service, and he's registered with all 3 legislative entities, et cetera. So let us look into this further, but I think we got,
yeah, especially since we're getting
Some.
2 different results. I just, all I wished was that we knew this was a conversation because we would have been a little more prepared. Although I will say this, if I may, thank you for giving us the update. There was a lot of interesting information there that I thought was important for us to know. And thank you for all of you for doing the work that you do. Because we clearly got, you know, we asked you for some priorities, they were delivered back. So, but definitely that is something that, Dr. Pace, please help us understand where the confusion is. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have a question about the priorities though.
Sure, oh my God, of course.
Going back to
Yeah.
that. Since I have you guys there, this past year was COVID and it's a weird year, and we knew the monies weren't gonna come in. And it sounds like a lot of the things that we focused on in 2021, which I was a part of and we approved, and that's not an issue, like compression, you know, those sound like collective things that a bunch of districts were fighting for. So it wasn't just like specifically Osceola County. Like, I think everybody wanted to be held harmless. And the compression, all the counties that impacted positively on compression were there. So I'd like to see us next year be able to fight for some things for Osceola County specifically. Especially it looks like all the revenue estimations go up higher. And like an example is, we had a strategy session last week, or not last week, the last board meeting, we had a strategic session, and we talked about one concept that came up was using applied math. You know, I know the textbooks may not, you know, allow that, but maybe we could run like a pilot program. And, you know, because we're talking about algebra, it's boring there, it's kind of written, and applied math shows you how you can use examples. I don't want to give you the long story, we can give that offline, but the point is, I want to see us fight for things specifically for Osceola County, not as a collective. And another item that I know I've been working with Congressman Soto, and I appreciate him for doing Neo City, like that's a specific thing that was for us. We also talked about the aviation program at Osceola High School, and he was in support of that, you know, at the congressional level. But there's only so much you can do. But the board, we have direction that we would like to do things to enhance that program. So I'd like to see if maybe there's like a special appropriation or something like that, that we can, in other words, fight for Osceola County, not just a collective, you know, generalization.
Madam Chair, following up on Julius's comment quick, I think
Is
the this is related to this, I think the lobbyists will agree with this.
Okay,
When you start fighting for an individual county, you will almost end up in opposition with the Department of Education, who does not support any county being treated different than any other county. We ran into that, Mike, when we got the 3 million. Remember that we had to fight the department, and fortunately the governor sided with our side on it. So just know that that's something, Julius, if you're gonna do, you gotta do it early, and you gotta really think through the strategy of how you avoid that battle.
yeah.
Well, you're right, those issues are a commonality with other counties and school districts, but we do have issues that are specific to the county. If you remember, a little over, I guess about 18, before the session before last, we were talking about priorities, and you have to be commended for the elect process. It's unique in the state of Florida. But we found out late in as session began that St. Cloud wanted a welding training program. The deadline for introduction of bills in the House for a project request and in the Senate for a member request in the budget had passed. The governor in January, right after he got elected, had announced that adult education was a priority for him. And so we kind of came up with an idea of applying for DEO job money. The city of St. Cloud needed a school district, and you all did everything that you needed to do. We submitted one great application. A lot of the business groups in the county supported it, wrote letters, the legislators wrote letters, and we followed that process through. What happened, many victims of COVID, that program was a victim of COVID. The structures that were going to be used for that, to going to house that program, were being donated by Orlando Utilities. Somehow the COVID retarded their process, so they couldn't give the buildings to the city. So that imploded that process. But I've stayed in touch with Jeff Arnott. We're going to meet tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to talk about Osceola specific adult training programs, what the priorities are, what can we do. You know, the legislature will fund those if you get out in front of them and talk to the legislators about it. And of course, we have the sheriff's program has put money in for adult education too. So,
And if you can then just share with us, and not now, but give us like a time hack, so that way the board can give you the priority too, you know, because I know when we wait till the delegation right before they meet, it's kind of too late because they got to have their appropriations set.
Yes.
You know, there's a train that's already moving, so if you kind of give us the lead time that we need,
Absolutely.
so that way we can discuss it as a board, what specific priorities that we would like as well.
But last year due to COVID, we weren't able to have these conversations.
Right,
You know?
absolutely.
So ended up with priorities that were not so much Osceola specific, but they were very important to the county.
Right.
So this year, hopefully we'll have the process to go through, or the time and the opportunity to go through the process, talk about the different priorities for the different OLED partners and develop a common priority list and just.
Yeah, and for the record, I am happy with the results with Jane from 2021, knowing the conditions.
Yeah.
But knowing the conditions in the future are going to be improving, then I want to kind of get back into that. So that's why I want to bring it up. I just want to, for the record, say that I wasn't disappointed with 2021. You guys did hit the check marks on that, and I was satisfied with the output.
So that is a process where you have to make the results happen. You don't engage and work it, and as you say, get in front of. If you wait till the session starts, as we did with the training program, you got to be really quick to find something you can do to fund that program. We were dead in the water because we didn't really know anything about it before the deadlines had passed. So, but yeah, we'll work together getting ready for the 2022 session. Jessica said the budget numbers encouraging. I keep hearing rumblings about the employee pool, that their employers are having a hard time finding employees, and I don't know if that's going to be of impact here in Osceola County, but it's something we need to pay attention to and see if there's something we can do to help that situation.
Thanks.
The school district having problems with employees?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, it would be good if we could kind of get some sort of update on the lobbyists, so we can kind of see what's going on. I think it's a statewide issue, so.
Sure.
So quick, I just meant to mention this. Something that you all may want to consider also is looking at the different silos. For example, instructional materials, transportation, those are two that come to mind that were woefully underfunded. Almost every district is paying a lot more than what they get. Those might be areas too. If there's one in particular, let's say transportation, where you all are just having to spend a lot of other money for your transportation budget, we could maybe ask for funds there too. So I meant to mention that, I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much. Board, do we have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for everything you do. Again, we are very lucky in Osceola County to have you guys, but also we have a great delegation that is highly involved in K-12 education. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the questions. We're gonna go ahead and move on. Thank you. Okay, so board, we are ready to approve some appointments and transfers. Dr. Pace?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair, I appreciate that very much, and thank you for your patience. For our folks in the audience tonight, if I could please invite Dr. LaTanya Harris to come up to the podium. We worked all summer to try to get our administrative team solid and had some kind of last minute maneuvering, so we're here tonight, however, to recognize and to recommend Dr. LaTanya Harris to become the next assistant principal at Harmony High School after Mr. Arscott went to become the principal at Tohopokalaiga. Dr. Harris has been a teacher in Orange County Public Schools, a teacher, curriculum coach, assistant principal, and principal in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, principal for Charter Schools USA and Bridge Prep, and is now serving as the Learning Resource Specialist and MTSS coach at the Osceola High School campus. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Florida State University and a master's degree and a doctorate degree in educational leadership from Nova Southeastern. Her husband is a dean for us at Discovery, so it's a family affair, and they both understand the pressures and the stress that come along with this position. So I'm honored tonight to recommend for your consideration Dr. Harris.
Motion approved.
Second.
Right, I have a motion by Mr. Melendez and a second by Mr. Bass. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
Burnt
Congratulations.
orange is gonna look great on you.
No, we apologize for not making this earlier in the agenda. Next time we'll do the lottery presentation second.
It's all related. Okay, did you wanna say anything? Oh, sorry. We did both. So, just to be clear, motion passes 5-0, or 4-0.
Congratulations.
So to the Honorable Chair and school board members of the School District of Osceola County, Dr. Pace, Mr. Phelps, Dr. Evans, and Mr. Allen, thank you for providing me with the opportunity to serve as the newest assistant principal at Harmony High School. To my former principals, Dr. Campbell and Ms. Santiago, I extend my sincerest appreciation for your leadership and guidance at Osceola High School. And to Mr. Hickey and my Harmony family, I'm excited to be along the board and look forward to meeting you individually and collectively. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And our next recommendation is unable to be here tonight, but I'm confident he's watching somewhere or will watch the videotape. Mr. John Armour, currently a dean at Celebration High School. I'd like to recommend to become the next assistant principal at Celebration High School. He's been a teacher at Horizon Middle. In fact, Mr. Allen hired him first into the district. He also worked with Mr. Phelps at Narcoossee Community and Narcoossee Elementary. He was a teacher at Eastlake Elementary, teacher and dean of students at Bella Lago, and has been at Celebration High in the dean's position since 2018. He received his bachelor's degree in elementary education from Oakland University and a master's degree in education and leadership from American College of Education. Mr. Armour and his family are traveling in Alaska to celebrate being 5 years cancer-free for his wife and also a 50th birthday. So while we miss him very, very much, we wish him the best, safe travels, and look forward to welcoming him back into leadership with your permission, board.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr.
I'm trying.
Arguello and a second by Mr. Melendez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-0. Congratulations. All right, team, so let's go ahead and discuss some agenda modifications. I do have one agenda modification already, which I think we're all aware of, which is we are pulling item 13.04 from information items, and we do have a blue sheeted item, which is now item number 19.01. I will go ahead and ask, starting with Mr. Melendez, do you have any agenda modifications?
Yes, Madam Chair. Item 10.06, 12.01.
1 second, please. Thank you.
Let me know
Okay,
you're
so we're pulling
10.06,
10.06, thank you.
12.01, and 12.02.
Okay, so just to confirm, we are pulling from consent 10.06, and this is all consent, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. 1201 and 1202. Thank you, Mr. Arguello.
10.07. We got 12.1 and 12.2. Also, that's regular.
Okay,
So just 10.07.
thank you. Mr. Bass?
I had 1201, 1202, but that's already been pulled. I just had a question on 801 and 806.
We'll pull it.
We'll just pull it just for conversation. It's a simple question.
Is Mr. Clencher or somebody from facilities?
Rhonda's here.
Oh, Rhonda.
801 and 2.
801 and 806.
All right, board, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda with the items that have been modified, please.
Second.
Do we need to delineate what we have taken out, Tanya, or are we good?
I've got, for clarification, 10.06, 10.07, 12.01, 12.02, 8.01, and 8.06.
Thank you.
And who did the second, I'm sorry?
Robert.
Ms. Bass.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and it looks like we can approve all items under 5, is that correct?
You're still doing the whole consent with these agenda modifications.
Okay, so do we have we have the second? We're good? Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and discuss the items that have been pulled. We will start.
Take a vote, I'm sorry.
We didn't vote.
Thank you. Guys, I'm learning, sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote for the consent agenda with the modifications, please.
Aye.
Okay, all those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, like sign. Vote passes 4-0, and now we can go ahead and discuss the items individually, and I think the first one was 8.1, is that correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
Again, it's a simple question. I noticed that the quote was, the contract was 204,954. But the quote was, and is that just a quote number? It just seems awful odd that the numbers were so close. The quote number was 240,382. I didn't know if that was just a misprint or was, because one says 240,382, but then the contract says 204,954.
801 with Curriculum Associates.
That's- is
Mr.
that-
Allen, working with Joanne Johnson, was able to negotiate the price of the contract down. So the actual contract amount is for the $201,000 listed on the agreement.
201?
Or I'm sorry, 204,954.24.
Gotcha, okay. I just saw when I was going through the agenda, saw the quote at 240 and, okay.
So are we gonna motion then to modify that agreement to reflect 204? So make sure we don't sign something without adjusting the contract amount?
The agreement is the actual contracted amount.
Right, the agreement, well, the contract did say that, but the agenda item detail said 240, and I just for clarification, wanted to make sure that the numbers were jive.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Relevant to your comment, Mr. Bass, the same may be true, you may notice for the G3000 contract, which was negotiated down nearly $100,000 by Ms. Johnson and team.
Gotcha, okay, that makes sense.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you for
negotiating down the amount and saving the school district money.
That's great, thank you, sir.
Okay, and the same for 802?
You need to vote on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I moved to approve the 801, my apologies.
Second motion.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Bass and a second by Mr. Melendez to approve item 8.01. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Okay, vote passes 4-0. Thank you. We had 8.02 as well?
No, I didn't have 802.
806.
806. Thank you.
It was just a question, I noticed there was a substantial increase from 20 to 21. I looked to try to find, it was from, I think, 375 last year and went up to 495 for this year. Just was kind of curious why the jump.
Is that because we're doing PSAT at grade 8? We've had it done before. Pardon me? It's the addition of the PSAT. Okay, yes. This next year, we are proposing that we add the PSAT 8-9 Assessment Early Participation Program. This gives us another measure to be able to identify our students ready for rigorous coursework, and that is in addition to the previous contract.
Is that a part of like the Duke Tips program, the kids that we identify that are gifted in that program?
The Duke Tips program is actually for 7th graders who are given an opportunity to take the SAT on a Saturday and provided tutoring ahead of time. This is above and beyond that, but it gives us another valid and reliable assessment measure that can be used for promotional purposes as well as placement in rigorous courses.
Board, any other questions?
Mr. Bass? I don't want to set a motion for your agenda item that you pulled, so I'd rather.
You were absolutely correct. So I move to approve 8.06.
Second that motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Bass, a second by Mr. Melendez to approve item 8.06. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Okay, team, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to item 10.06, and that was pulled, was that by Mr. Melendez?
Yes, Madam Chair. On this one, there's a request for diversity, and I appreciate what it's trying to do, but there's two issues that I have. Number one, that it's a piggyback contract, indicating that there's usually speed involved when a piggyback contract, or there's like a low price, like you just gotta take advantage of a low price, so you piggyback off a state contract. Now, the issue is when it involves speed, well, this is the first time that I hear about this, because I know that we've talked about, diversification in a general sense at the strategic plan, but I never heard about us actually contracting with a consultant to do a diversity evaluation. And so that's a little bit concerning that the first time I hear about it is when we got to approve a vote for it, as opposed to kind of TPing this, having a discussion and saying, okay, what is the purpose of it? What are the objectives? What are we trying to get out of it? And we had a very productive strategic plan session last time. And so I'm just a little bit concerned about the process, not necessarily this contractor. It's more of, again, this is the first time I hear about it, and then we're piggybacking off another contract, and it seems like it's kind of going a little bit too quick, and there's a lot of things going on, and I'm always a fast guy. I like to do a lot of things quick, but when it comes to contracting, those are things that I kind of like to have more time to digest and maybe have the board have a discussion about, what are we specifically looking for? What are the outcomes? What do we consider a successful result versus non-successful result? So I don't want to interpret this as, anything wrong with the contractor itself. It's just more, it's about the process for the district and how we move forward and looking at new contracts that we haven't seen before or discussed as a board. There's comments from, I think Superintendent, you have a few.
If I may? Yes, please. I certainly appreciate your concern, Mr. Melendez, and we don't often do a piggyback contract. However, because of the scope and sequence of this event, the complexity of what it is that we wanted them to do was difficult to put an RFP out by ourselves when they already had one that had been initiated in other situations. We originally talked about looking further at our diversity, equity, inclusion, and going further in terms of the program and evaluation that Leah shared with the board during our strategic planning workshop of that she had done. We talked about the training that we've provided throughout the course of the year to our leaders on ways that we can better address the needs of all of our students, particularly when we've identified some students who are not being successful on a global standpoint, and we've always talked about all means all. And this was something that we believed, this in conjunction with the actual proposal itself, which comes on the regular agenda because it is an expenditure of contract of monies, would help us go to the next step in our strategic plan goals and initiatives about equity. Because it really comes down to, we've been talking about where we are from a data standpoint. We've gotten some internal stakeholder input. We heard from the Alliance for Public Schools that there is a concern about equitable distribution of resources, which also gets back to equity. We know that we're trying to continue to diversify staff so that our students see and learn from leaders and teachers, that represent them and that they can relate to from a cultural standpoint. And the goal behind working with MGT would be to help us go to the next step, because they specifically talked in their proposal about not only just gathering some additional information, looking at the data that we already have, but also then helping us identify specific actions based on best practices, based on what's been successful in other places to improve outcomes for kids. So that's kind of the goal here. And I apologize if you feel like we've tried to rush this. We've talked about it a little bit in our ESSER budget. I felt like we talked a little bit about it in the strategic planning workshop, but certainly we can do better on that.
Yeah, and then would you be opposed then just delaying it one board meeting and having a workshop specifically on that item? And we can, because I know Ms. Castillo has constantly talked about diversity in different respects. You know, Mr. Arguello said the same thing too when it comes to committee representation. You know, I have some, ideas myself as well about minority participation in the procurement process. So diversity can be a huge word in and of itself. And so I think it might be appropriate to maybe then just have a specific workshop. They don't always have to be 3-hour workshops, but I don't feel like having a long conversation now at a regular board meeting, that if we could just delay it and just have us come up with your concepts, because I think you mentioned that, it's your quote, what does diversity mean? You know what I mean? So before we start spending money on a consultant, that we better define as a board, what kind are we looking for? You know, and what those desires are, and then maybe we can revisit again. So I'm not opposed to this. I just want the board to be involved in creating the parameters of what we're looking for and how to define what success looks like.
And certainly, Mr. Melendez, this is all at the pleasure of the board in terms of where we want to go next with our strategic plan, in terms of this equity concept. We can have staff have this discussion with the board and seek your input. We can have a consultant here to talk about what they have in mind in terms of this. We originally met with MGT as a part of a DOE study where they were looking at lessons learned from COVID. So that was the original outreach. I had an opportunity to meet with their team, including Dr. Lamont Brown, who's proposed to be the lead on this particular project if we move it forward. But that is entirely at the pleasure of the board. I would just say that if we decide to table item 8.
We have to table the regular agenda item too.
10.06, I would also ask the board's pleasure in allowing me to request us to pull item 17.02 for further review after a workshop.
And it's not tabling indefinitely, just table it so we can have that conversation however you deem it's appropriate, whether it's staff meets individually or we have like a workshop, kind of like how the auditors, RSM, came to us and say, hey, what do you want us to look at? You know, I want to be able to maybe have that initial conversation and know the consultant. I never even met the consultant yet, I'm giving this consultant money, you know, it's like, and to me, it just doesn't work that way. You gotta work with me, you know, and let us know what our priorities are. At least that's my opinion, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I don't know what the rest of, how the rest of the board feels.
I'm good with that.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the process of piggybacking, but I do have a problem because one thing I can wholeheartedly agree with is the fact that I feel like we have not had this discussion. It's a discussion that I would like to have. The discussion has never really been complete or has been had at a substantial level. So now that also we're gonna pay, $150,000 to a consulting firm that for a contract that I actually requested for a contract to look at the contracts that they've done for Hillsborough. So in order to have a grasp. So I do feel comfortable voting on this and passing it if the superintendent will give us her word that we will be brought in as a board as to what the four corners of this agreement is and what the intent is and so on, then I would be okay. But I do agree that it just seems kind of, we do so much, and I actually had this on the regular, I was gonna bring this up at the regular agenda, that we pay a lot of consultants, a lot. If we took a tiny, just a scintilla of a fraction of the amount that we pay for consultants for things that I think that we should be able to do in-house, we would probably be able to give all of our teachers a $1,000 check. And it just seems like a tremendous amount of money that we spend on expertise that, we have how many doctorates on this board, how many people on this board that this is their field and they should we're assigning our duties as a school district to many vendors. This happens to be a good vendor with a great reputation, a former legislator, and I do trust that they're gonna do good work. I would like to be involved in the process of developing what their mission is though.
Right, and that's where I kind of disagree with you, Mr. Aguayo. I like you, but I gotta disagree. we have to know the four corners first before you give it to a consultant. If you hire a consultant and you're trying to come up with the four corners, that bill starts ringing up, ring, 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 ring. And I don't like to spend extra money unnecessarily. I like to create the four corners first, or at least have some kind of defined direction. And then they could come in there and give us the four corners to get to down to the, scintilla, I think I forgot your fancy word there. But I think the board has to decide what we want first, then speak to the consultant. It's not speaking to the consultant and let them come up with us and just, I just don't, I'm just so cheap, you know, I mean, I don't like, I like to hold on to every dollar I possibly can, you know, and, because it's the taxpayers' money and it's very sacred to me. And that's just my opinion.
It sounds like what we're trying to decide is whether or not we can vote on this. I would like you to be comfortable making this decision, so I'm gonna go ahead and table it for your pleasure. I'm not sure that we specifically need to have a workshop on it, but you know, I certainly wouldn't mind if the consultants spoke with us directly, like some of the other consultants have, and just ask those questions. So if it does make you feel more comfortable to table, I'm completely okay with doing that. Yeah? Okay.
You got a motion.
Okay, I motion to table item 10.06, then I guess on the regular agenda, I have
We
to
can talk
include
about
that.
that after,
When it
yeah.
gets to that point, but at least we'll table 10.06 in order to have some kind of discussion with the consultant first to define the four corners of the contract or the scope of
I'll
work.
second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Melendez, a second by Mr. Bass. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, board. Let's go ahead and move on to item 10.7.
Yes, so I pulled this and I just wanted to ask if this was brought before a committee or the people who review basically our healthcare plan. It's a change to our insurance. I know that I think we have an insurance presentation this evening, but I just wanted to make sure that more than one set of eyes saw this and okayed it and thought that this was fair for our employees.
Yeah, it has been reviewed by our
It was reviewed by
consultants and our advisor team
consultants
and it was recommended by them.
Okay, that's all. Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Argoleo and a second by Mr. Melendez to approve item 10.7. 10.07. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, board. Let's go ahead and move on to the next items that were pulled. That looks like 12.01, that was pulled by several board members. Not sure who wants to take the lead on this.
Well, I just have one simple question, and maybe not be as bad. It sounds like it's the fourth amendment. How many more amendments to get to the final amendment? And what's stopping us from getting to the final amendment?
Good evening, board.
Ms. Blake, for the benefit of the community, would you describe the amendment?
Rhonda, give your name and position.
You have 3 minutes.
Oh, I thought that's what you were gonna say. That's what I thought you were
For the
gonna say.
record, we need to have it on here.
Rhonda Blake, Director of Planning Services. This is an agreement that goes back, I believe, into about 2014, and it is for a dedicated K-8 school site in the Kindred development. The first amendment was simply to go back and put a date on the agreement. It actually went through, was recorded without the date added to the front page. So the first amendment was just simply correcting a Scrivener's error. The second amendment was created by the delay with the county bringing Cross Prairie Parkway through. The third was actually at our request. As more charter schools came online and other development, we were able to delay fitting the school into our funded budget and needing to create it. The developer is actually ready to deliver the site to us later this year. But again, we are not ready to build on this site for the school to open until 2024. So we asked the developer to hold off on conveying it to us until 1 year from now.
I remember having a conversation about this.
We have a meeting scheduled, I know exactly where you're going.
Again, then I'm gonna ask for Mr. Bass's appraisal thing, you know, I'm in real estate as well, the costs keep going up. What happens if the title conveys to us and we don't pay property taxes, so all we have to do is like mow the grass, you know what I mean? It's like, why don't we take title to it, you know, beforehand, because developers have been known to go bankrupt and things like that, and does that nullify the contract if they go belly up?
On this particular site, I can tell you that the gopher tortoises are moving back in. And at this point, the developer is responsible for mitigating them and moving them, and that is much more extensive than it sounds because each tortoise gets 2 burrows. So,
and so what they're saying
so
is,
basically, we
if the title's on them, the onus is on them, the title conveys to us, the onus is on
They literally have to give us a
us.
ready-to-build site, so if they do give it to us now, as all the construction comes in, if all the little tortoises decide to keep coming to our lot, we will end up mitigating. So there are other pros and cons to that situation.
Members of the board, following, just having raised this before, Tanya and Facilities did a great job of giving me an outline of all the reasons why you would not take ownership. And we now have a scheduled meeting with me and Tommy Callan to literally attack and say, okay, let's really look at that, because one of the things that happens is sometimes you're giving them impact fee credits, so we don't own the property, right? But so we're looking at, let's evaluate each site. Should we take this site now or shouldn't we? This one, when I heard about the gopher tortoises, I go way back with gopher tortoises. I don't want to go anywhere near gopher tortoises. And so that made a lot of sense, since they have to deliver a ready site for us, let them deal with.
But if the gopher tortoise, just for legal purposes, if the gopher tortoises do come back and just colonize the whole site, do they then have to give us an alternative site?
By then, the master plan has already been developed and we've already accepted this site, so they will have literally built the homes around our site.
Woo, that would be a nasty pickle for us to get into then. Then we don't even have a site to build a school on.
No, they gotta relocate the tortoises.
We would relocate them, and they're very expensive to relocate.
Typically about $1,700 a piece.
They get a new home. I don't know if they're happy with the new home or not, but they get a new home and it's very expensive.
Are we allowed to do that through the EPA? To like, I know you can move like 1 or 2, but if I'm just coming up with theory here, but I like to practice that now. Like if there's 20 gopher tortoises there.
We actually looked at a site for transportation once, and halfway through the site, we stopped counting at 100, and we just said, no, thank you to the site, because we were only halfway through it. It can get very expensive.
It's an issue. We're gonna come up with a final defined position site by site, because I advocate for taking ownership right away, but I understand, the minute she mentioned gopher tortoise, I went, oh, no. All right, and we know they're moving.
As the
We know they're moving around out
continues,
there.
they're just gonna keep going to the vacant lots.
Rhonda, is there an additional cost? What would be the cost at being conveyed the land later on?
So as Mr. Melendez points out, the market of the land, so the land could go up, the land could go down. Right now, we don't see that, but there have been times when land costs have gone down. I kind of tell Frank, for me, I think it's a site by site. An example I could give you is right now we're working with another developer. We're talking about 2 sites and thousands of acres. We can pinpoint our site, but we can't get to it. This site now has a road in front of it, so we actually could access it and it would be easier for us. But sometimes with the developers, when we're looking at sites 15, 20 years out, we know we're just promised a home somewhere inside of a master plan. So once we all get to the table and they bring their people to the table and we bring ours, then we can solidify it down. But the agreements have to be cut up front, so Osceola County or the 2 municipalities can put it inside of the development order that they are required to mitigate a site with us. So we kind of start at point X, and then as all the development comes, we start fine tuning more and more the closer we get to the lot.
Essentially, the removal of these turtles, according to what Mr. Shateris, price per turtle was, let's say, between $250,000 and $300,000. Are we gonna be paying more than that by having the land conveyed later?
It depends on what the market's going to do and when we appraise it.
That's what we're.
I mean, we've had it appraised right now. We know the current value of the property is $2 million.
And there's no real way to project the future, what land would be 2 years from now. It's speculative.
So you're hedging at $300,000, it's gonna be less than $300,000 that we're gonna be paying for the land later.
I mean, it's all in the market and what it will do.
We're gonna come back to the board and lay out all of the issues, the pros and all the cons, and then have you
Now,
final direction on this.
Now, has the developer met the other conditions though? Like put utilities in place, like you said, the road? Because I know there's other conditions too beyond just, hey, having the land ready to go.
The road is just coming through now, so they're actually just starting to bring all their utilities and everything forward. So that's why we were looking at a little later in the year. But yes, when we take conveyance, then it'll be a ready-to-build site. So also the dangers, and that would be is if they gave it to us now, it would sit there a year, so we'd have to go back and do our own grading or anything of that nature. Because when they hand it to us, it would be a year before we're ready to even start making any movement on the site as a school board.
Rhonda, my question's not turtle or price related, but it's the aesthetics of it all, because I went and looked at the site, and it's one of the last oak hammocks that's on that site. Is there anything that I know they're gonna deliver it to us ready to build, but can they just not mess with the trees and let us decide where we wanna put the school and let us keep the tree? Because there's a lot of oak trees on there that would be nice to have. And it's frustrating to see all of our schools look like, no, I don't say small prisons, I don't mean it that way, but it's just a barren concrete and no trees.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'll yield back to Joe here and Ms. Thacker in a moment, I believe she asked that question and the facilities team requested that the trees be cleared. So actually, her client is now having to work with the county to create a tree relocation plan. Is that
And I don't want them relocated. If that's gonna be our site, I want some of those trees to stay there if at all possible.
Let's do this, get with facilities. Let's look at the site. Do all the trees need to be removed?
I don't mean to be,
Or
I'm
just-
not trying to be a quote tree hugger, but I mean, if you got these big oak trees, it sure would be nice to have, because some of our school grounds, they don't have that.
We can take a look at that with facilities.
Now, what's the, I guess Ms. Stacker's here, what is the build out projections? Because you said that we're not ready to build on it yet, probably because there aren't enough houses going up there. How many phases are in there? How many houses are left to reach full capacity of Kindred, to be developed?
So when this particular school first opens, the intent is it will take in the Kindred development as well as a portion of the Tahokwa development and about 20% from the outside of those two communities. And then as Kindred continues to build out, we will kickstart the K-8 school in Tahokwa. We'll move the Tahokwa children out of the Kindred school over to the Tahokwa school. And that entire concept coming in around the lake will kind of work like that. And then for a while, Tahokwa will share with Edgewater, and as Tahokwa builds out, then we'll trigger the Edgewater school. They'll share with either Fontana or Bellaterra. So it's just gonna be this constant sharing of all the developments as the land comes through. So one of the things that has slowed this down is the opening of Rich Prep on Canoe Creek Road.
Yeah, Canoe Creek Road.
And then as well as us taking over Canoe Creek Charter, all of that creates, and then we added the additional seats at Michigan Avenue. We added 200 more seats there. So that's allowed us to push this school from 21 to 22 to 24.
Further questions?
I'm satisfied, Mr. Bass, if you don't have any other questions.
No, I'm good.
A motion approved 1201.
A second.
I have a motion from Mr. Melendez and a second from Mr. Bass to approve item 12.01. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Was that the last item that we had?
Nope, stay there,
You know,
Rhonda.
they pulled
Stay
12.02
there.
as well, which is fine.
12.02, okay.
Alright, yeah, 12.2 was, a whole new development I didn't even realize, because we sat down a couple times, we talked about comprehensiveness. Let me know where everything's at. We talked about maybe a potential high school on the west side of town, but I was thinking around like Ham Brown Road, or it was Poinciana Boulevard and whatever road, I keep getting all these roads confused. But anyway, the point is, between, 192 and yes, and now I'm seeing, whoa, another potential high school. I'm like, wait a second, like, where did this come from? Did the county just approve of this recently? We didn't know about it?
So this is a final build out for the Poinciana community. So while they're finishing out Sola Vida, they also have Sola Vida Grand, which we're now calling Westview. And as you can see, this development alone is gonna be about 5,000 units. So based on how we mitigate with the developers, that generated a high school and a K-8. Basically, Liberty is full. We've been counter redistricting from Celebration to Poinciana to the point they're both full. We've added 2 wings at Poinciana. So it'll give us a little room to bring all of that home inside of Westview, which will then ultimately, many years out, allow us to free up space at Poinciana to help offset that overcrowding we're feeling.
Right. No, my only concern then when Westview, because again, I didn't see it before in the comprehensive plan, just kind of hit me, is the issue that we talked about when it comes to Sunbridge. That Solavita is right, you're kissing Polk County, you know? And I know that we can try to say all the development's gonna be in-house and contained, but I know it's gonna bleed over to Polk County to a certain degree. And now we have those out-of-county transfers where we can't even stop them from doing that. Are we in negotiations with Polk County at all to share some of that burden?
If we have space.
Well, right now, we are not in negotiations with Polk County because they're mitigating their impact with us, and anything they build on the Polk County side of the house, they're mitigating those arrangements with the Polk County. So this is their impact actually being built on this side of the county line, that these students would be zoned directly in.
So are they planning a school right there next to it? So we're gonna have like two schools right next to each other, crossing each other's lines? And that's what I'm talking about. Let's have those conversations now to get an idea of what the comprehensive plan looks like, because there's no need for, okay, yeah, we're mitigating, we're building a school here, we're building a school there, and high schools now, oh my God, they're $100 million. We can't build a high school less than $100 million. And so we're on the hook to pay $100 million, and 20% of the students may be coming from Polk County, and lo and behold, they didn't have to pay the impact fee, they didn't have to pay for the build out, you know what I mean? We have to be able to have a kind of coordination of, when you say that mitigation, I wanna see that plan. I wanna see how many schools they're building, and maybe we can cheat and we can use up some of their capacity. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, let's be smart and let's get ahead of the game. Let's stop thinking not territorial, stop thinking about our own little silo and think territorial and say, hey, what is Polk County's doing? And maybe we kind of lay back in our development plans to see what Polk County's doing. And we build the minimum amount that we need to satisfy that growth.
I do believe, Dr. Pace, if we were to start moving our students to Polk, let's say we pulled back and we let Polk take the lead, the FTE goes with them to Polk. So I'm just gonna say, at least if the Polk County students come to us, we will bring the FTE, and then the impact fees were collected by the homeowners here.
But that FTE may be far down the road though. We gotta pay the impact fee, we gotta pay the development. But the point is just to look at it as a whole and make a calculated decision. I'm not saying just lay back and just do Polk County, but it needs to be a coordinated effort. We need to know what Polk County is doing, and maybe we can have an amicable agreement, you know? If they wanna have, if the need is 2 elementary schools, for instance, right? Look at it globally and say, okay, maybe you build one elementary school, we build an elementary school. So regardless of how the FTE goes, we share. I just think that we need to be good neighbors, and that was the same issue that I had with Sunbridge. So it's like I'm repeating myself over and over again, because I think that we need to, especially when developments are so close to the border, we need to have those conversations to be as efficient as possible with the tax dollars. And I don't really care about FTE flowing here and there, I care about just globally, just being a good community and developing together.
Okay, Dr. Pace wanted to add something to the conversation.
I
Thank you
was
for
just
using
gonna
your button.
suggest, Mr. Melendez, that maybe it would be helpful if I worked with our Choice and Innovation Office and our budget department and look at that inter-county piece. Because I think what we're gonna find, based on the data that we've reviewed before, is that it really balances itself. We have Polk County students coming in, we have Osceola County students going to Polk. The same thing happens along the Lake Nona area with Orange County students, where some come in, some go out, because that's the way the design of the choice legislation was. We can put a limit on people coming in based on a capacity issue, but we have tried to be as open as we can and as hospitable as we can to choice requests, to honor parents' opportunity to do that, and then also it helps to balance our FTE. But if it's okay with the board, I will work on an actual report so that you can see what that impact looks like in the existing developments that we have now.
Absolutely. And just mainly the border ones are the ones that concern me the most. I'm not concerned about the ones in the heart of Osceola County. It's the ones that are on the fringes.
And you know, you may be onto something again, Mr. Melendez, because when you were on the board before, I believe is when we worked out the Four Corners agreement.
Absolutely.
You know, but one of the challenges that we found in Four Corners is that most of those students are not Osceola County students, and yet there are 3 board members on that Four Corners board, and we really, quite frankly, could use the seats there to help relieve West Side. but do we kick kids out? You know, we haven't done that either. So I think those are just decisions and conversations certainly worth having. But let me get you some data to help you with that conversation.
And especially while we're early in the process and we can make a change, you know, rather than it's too late and, oh, we can't do it because we're already 5, years into it and whatever.
I believe Mr. Arguello has a comment as well.
Yeah, I agree that, I think that maybe we should have a little bit more of a comprehensive, long-term view of how the development is happening, have a better relationship with the developer so that we have appropriate expectations for educating these kids that are being brought to the county. I was just thinking, Ms. Blake, what Poinciana really needs is 6,000 more units of housing. Especially jammed together really closely because traffic's not quite bad enough yet there. So it would be great if something like this would be brought to us along with the county, and there's actually a plan to not just continue sink Poinciana into traffic hell, you know? So I know our job is just to put the school there, but at the same time, it just seems like it's random, at a developer's will. They come in, put in 5,000 units, it's been very easy to get everybody's rubber stamp on it, and then you sit in traffic for an hour, right? And so I would really like for this district to be proactive in improving the community through development, not making it miserable. So whatever we can do would be great.
Thank you. Mr. Bass?
Definitely agree with Mr. Arguello, but mine is a little more specific now that I'm looking at the master plan, because I looked at the overlay as well, and where I know you should never look at gift tours because they're going to be basically conveying those sites to us, but we never get the prime piece of real estate, it seems like. So you've got the high school where Marigold terminates into the parkway, and the high school is right there. So I mean, I don't know, is that really the best location? And then the other, the K8, when you look at it, it's right in the middle of a bunch of cypress head. So are we gonna have any problems later down the road when they go for mitigation? I mean, they may tell us, sorry, you can't build here, and now what?
I can tell you that the facilities planning teams have worked with the developer, Taylor Morrison, and these were not the original sites. We were able to actually get them to move these sites based on road accessibility, also trying to meet the requirements that the county wants us to have, because they have a lot of say in where we do and don't place our schools as well, based on their LDC, that these were the 2 locations agreed to by district staff, the developer, and the county.
I don't want our kids sloshing around in water. That's basically because we've ran into this situation at Celebration, and like they put the ball fields in a certain place, and it's right up against the side, and it's just a constant problem. So
Maybe the county should put an insurance policy saying that if we run into that problem later, that they pick up the bill.
Well, then I motion to TP this because there's just too many questions. And until we get like a full vetting, because again, there's gonna be, obviously the way these approvals go, it's so far out, we have time, there's no real rush.
Well, actually, the SDP is coming through the county, and as part of that, they have to meet the requirement to
What's
mitigate
that? I'm sorry, I got so many acronyms in my head.
the site development plan, so
Okay, I'm
they're moving along through the plan. So as part of their approval is acknowledging that they have mitigated 2 sites with us. So if we do not accept the agreement or we place a hold on it, then I have to place a hold on the development itself with the county, and typically we do not take the stance to hold development moving
Well,
forward.
I think now's a new time to take a stance, because we have a little bit more work to do. This is the first time I've seen it, I've never even seen it before. So I don't wanna say yes to something.
Let's make sure when we leave here, if that's what you decide to do as a board, that we have specific direction from the board as what you want addressed, so that we don't come back and not have it addressed. Meaning, we're addressing X and you thought Y.
Yeah, like for instance, the development plans on the Polk County side, do they have any plans to build schools? How many schools? Where are they located? Are they planning to do a high school, elementary schools? So that's my biggest concern, is the Polk side, what are they doing to mitigate as far as the school concerned? How many schools are they planning to build? And we're-
How long, do we have any wiggle room to maybe table this maybe to one meeting? Would one meeting you think be sufficient to answer your questions? Would
Well,
you
it
like a
depends how
report?
fast staff can get together. I mean, it's not on me, it's on staff to do the work.
Okay,
The answer
I'm
is-
trying to get a timeline,
No, I understand.
so,
The answer is
staff-
between now and August 3rd,
okay,
we could be ready.
that's,
That
I'm
will
trying
still
to
require you to
give
put it
a
on hold.
specific deadline because there are others who are waiting on the decision, so that's all I'm trying to do. And I think if we have the commitment from staff to be able to deliver the information specifically, and I'm sure you have other questions as well, then we might be able to be okay with tabling it for until August 3rd?
It's due. We've already gone past the due date, so I will just have to go ahead and place it on hold with a notation that the school board tabled this decision until August
Well,
3rd.
Rhonda, I got a question, why, I mean, this master plan couldn't have been done yesterday, I mean, why didn't we get a chance to look at this?
Well, those planning staff have been seeing it, they've been talking to us for over a year. So we start with them at conceptual, then we work with them through preliminary. So like I said, we've been working with them, we've been working with facilities, and we all agreed on this location. So as they've moved through the different stages, we've been saying, we're working with them. And then typically we just bring the mitigated agreements to the school board to say, they're more than 750, so based on the number of units they're going to build, staff has calculated a high school, a K-8, an elementary, whatever our calculations are, and we bring the mitigation agreement to the.
This is a little disheartening, and I'm gonna direct it to the superintendent, because she's my employee, not you, Rhonda. I had a conversation with staff, and we went over comprehensive, and this is the first time that I'm hearing about it, and she just testified that they had initial conversations about this over a year ago. And I had discussions to say, hey, let me see the big picture, because we talked about the big redistricting at Westside K-8 and everything like that. It was during that time frame. I was like, hey, and we were also talking about impact fees and $100 million schools, and I had a heartache over that. So I was like, hey, give me the big picture. And this is the first time I hear about potential new development, new high schools, and then to Robert's, testimony, it's like the timeline is like right now. You know what I mean? It's like, well, why wasn't this done earlier? And why is the board only getting informed right now at the last minute? That's a process problem.
Well, and certainly we will work hard to address that. Understand that none of these schools would be in the 10-year plan, correct?
These two schools, no, they would not be in the 10-year plan.
Correct. So typically with the board, we do a 5-year outlook and then we look at a 10-year outlook in terms of schools' construction needs because things are constantly changing. What this does is reserve a site within the development so that when the time comes, the board can decide at that time, do we need a school? Are we moving forward with the school? We've made a commitment to the developer that they're gonna reserve the site based on the way we think the project is gonna build out. But again, not to pull anything over anybody's head, this is just the development timeline and the development process, in that we don't anticipate that we would need a site there for at least something outside the 10-year plan. But we certainly can talk about any potential developments coming up if that is the desire of the board.
Yeah, because concurrency doesn't, I had that conversation with Frank, it doesn't really exist, but we're still a part of the development process. At some point, a development has to come to the board for our phase of the approval. I think it would be an appropriate process for any school, and I don't want to isolate this specific thing. Anytime some developer goes, hey, I want to build X number of houses, maybe not 4 houses, but something that's big enough to trigger the development of a school, I think we should know early on. As soon as you know, we should know. There should be nothing staff knows that we don't know when it comes to triggering a development, so that way we can talk about beautiful trees, underwater stuff, agreements with all the way counties. It's like, again, and I'm not trying to isolate this specific incident. This is a process issue. And I think that earlier in the timeline, we need to get engaged so that way we can get flush out some of those concerns early on rather than wait until last minute.
Let me say one thing so everybody understands. This is a change in a process because we have 3 board members who want the process changed. Prior to this board, they just it was always done this way, and they weren't engaged other than when it got to the table. So all we need to be knowing is you want the process different, just like the purchasing, we'll tweak the process.
No, I haven't been issued my rubber stamp yet, so.
And that's how come I'm not addressing anything to you, Rhonda, I'm just trying to do it appropriately to the superintendent, and
Well, to
say,
expound
hey,
on what
this is one of the new
Dr.
things, the growing pains of being a bigger district.
So to
Mr.
expound on
Melendez, I
what
do
Dr.
appreciate
Pace
you
is saying,
directing those questions to me. You know, certainly we have our content experts here, but as we all know, I work for the board, and we'll take all of this into consideration as we work hard to move our process forward.
and the real purpose is to get the county or municipality to put in the development order that the school sites have been mitigated. So for instance, Lake Topacliga, that will go all the way around to more than 100,000 homes. In that development order, it says there are 217 acres set aside for schools. And then as those developers come along, then that's when we start negotiating those sites. So, you know, Edgewater is 7,500 homes. We're currently talking to them about a high school and a K-8. So all of those developments that were pre-2014 are now finally coming out of the ground. So there's 217 acres worth of schools over the next 20 years we will talk about. So it is just a change in the process.
Can you
but
tell me
it's-
where you think that the breakdown is? Is it with the county? Is it with the developer? Is it with us? Where is the breakdown that this would come before us and we'd have to do it, otherwise somebody else pays a consequence?
Well, I don't think there's a breakdown. I think the county has their process. They have their land development code, and they have allowed for us, even though we do not have concurrency, we've kind of set a threshold that any development over 750 dwelling units, we have that developer come to the table and we start talking dedication of school sites. So as soon as a plan comes across our desk and we see all of them, we trigger at 750 and we notify them, you need to come forward. And then that county or that municipality works with us. They tell that developer, you will work with the school district, you will work with them on a dedicated school site. Then we get down to the mitigation agreement. We've brought it to the board in the past, and that was their role. They set that threshold.
See, and I think that's the appropriate timeline, just trying to talk about the process, just the process, Ms. Blake, and I respect you very much. That's when that approval gets in there, and the applicant submits the initial application. Let's have the Business Advisory Review Board or Land Development Board, if we wanna have a new committee, if that's outside of the scope of that. And they could kinda ask some of those initial questions, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? To me, that's the purpose of having advisory committees.
And when you get triggered, we should get triggered. At the
Exactly.
same time, we should get notification as soon as you're triggered that a $750 million home, 750 homes are gonna be.
And certainly that's
And
that's
we
a
can do
nice
that.
way
That's
to
just a
identify
change in the
that's part of the
process.
process. Like I said, the board
Absolutely.
established the threshold of that 750 homes based on the planning analysis that Rhonda and her team shared. If you wanna be notified, add that trigger, we're happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, at least be like on our radar.
May I ask,
Probably
just
is an
for the
information
purposes of this meeting and this particular item, it sounds like we are not ready to vote on this, or some board members wanna go ahead and table it. And it also sounds like there is a conversation about the change in the process, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so are we in agreement that we would like to have this tabled until August 3rd, or is there an additional conversation?
Well, I think you brought up two good points then, Madam Chair. So I'm okay with tabling it to August 3rd. And then to create a new process, is that like a school board rule? Or is that just a directive to the
that's
superintendent?
yeah.
You know?
Staff, I got that.
Okay,
That Dr. Pace will take care of that.
got it. May I have a motion then to
I
table?
got one last
Oh,
question.
sure, sorry, Rob.
And I just wanted to share with you,
Oh.
it was my only concern when I looked at the map and its geographic location, and it is 10 years out, I understand. Is there any outside chance that 10 years down the road, and when we need that school site, could the environmentalists say, that's not a good site, that won't work? Is there an outside chance that could happen?
Well, typically we will, when we get to go in this early, we're part of the master plan, so you know, all the engineers, all the environmentalists, everybody's looked at that. But anything can change as the years go. For instance, with Edgewater, they're redoing their master plan because they're relocating the turnpike ramp. So that has forced them to go in, redo their map. We had to make adjustments to the high school site because of that new turnpike. So theoretically, anything's possible, but we try to get it secured in as soon as we can because, you know, they start their infrastructure, they start their roads, they have to accommodate our infrastructure, our pipe upsizing, downsizing, whichever direction we're going. So it's just making sure everything is there so when we're ready to trigger that site, that site is ready and available to us to bring that school in when the students will be there.
And then the turtle shell.
And then the turtles. They'd have to be soft shell because the gophers are not gonna live in that.
Not out there.
Are you all settled, Robert?
Yeah, I'm good.
Any other comments or questions, team? Oh, yes, Mr. Cropper.
Tanya, I mean, Rhonda, time is money for everybody. And when you're a developer, you got financing, you got everything. I know we have figured out at times where the process could continue to move at the county because we could stop them from going to the next level. Remember, we did that on the one, you can't pull any permits till you resolve this issue.
We can do
So we
that,
kept control.
or we can
Is there a
extend
way
the
to do
FS.
that on this project where they're not held up, but the board has the ultimate control to stop it all?
Well, what I could do is extend the comments to say that we're continuing to work with them through the SDP, and I could put the hold at the final subdivision. But the negative in that is that a final subdivision, all of the engineering has been done. So if there was something at that level that we wanted to make a big change, it'd be a very expensive change for the developer at that point. But if we're pretty sure we want to move in this direction, we just want a better understanding of the process and how we're going to move forward in the future, then I'd be
Now, if
comfortable
the
making
school
that statement.
board on August 3rd, they go forward, school board says, we want something changed. They don't have to go back, they can make that change and bring it to the final stage, right? I'm trying to figure out how to make this work.
She's been dying to come up here, but the chair recognized her to come up here.
How far along
And we have our own local expert in.
Joe Thacker. One thing that I did want to say is I want to understand what your issues are, so when it comes back on August 3rd, I can totally address them and make sure that you're comfortable. We have been working with staff for a long time because staff had some concerns about where the sites should go. So they've been modified and moved to be able to accommodate what the school district wanted, what the county wanted, and the developer, they don't know if you all will ever take the site down or not, but they are setting aside the property just in case you want to in the future. And so this is a very large development. It's gonna take many, many years to develop it out, and that's why the schools are not even in your 10-year plan. So the developers wanna work with the school district. They wanna set aside the property. They wanna, make you all happy because then they can move forward with their development. The STP that's in place is a very first level, a first phase. So it doesn't include these particular sites. These come in a further phase as far as the site development plan. So I'm happy to sit down with each and every one of you and make sure I understand what your concerns are and that we do this. We did follow the process that is in place right now, and this agreement is very similar to other agreements that you all have approved in the past, specifically Sunbridge. I think that's probably the most recent one that you've done of this size. And that was City of St. Cloud. So I think this is, so I want to understand the difference, what you all are looking for then on this project versus what you've done very recently. And the developer is happy to work with you and wants to, if you all have a good school there, guess what? They have a good community. So they work hand in hand. So they want to make sure that you all are satisfied as well. So I want to understand how to do that.
I think one issue is that we have been here for, I guess, almost a year, right? And so when things were coming up 1 month after our election, if something like this comes up, we can expect that, right? Because we haven't been there, right? Especially somebody who's been elected for 5 minutes. So as time goes on, now we've been here for many, 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 many months. We've never heard about it. Now we hear about it. It's like we should, don't come so quick. So, like when your kids come to you and they want something now, right? And it's just like, give me a warning, you need shoes by tomorrow. It's 11 o'clock at night,
Been there.
So, well, exactly. So same thing, so it's kind of the same thing here that
there's no warning, there's no, it's just a very abrupt, and it's abrupt and a large nature.
That definitely sounds like it's a process issue that I think Dr. Pace has already committed to solving.
And my biggest issue, just to clarify that, because that's a great point, my issue isn't really so much with the development, it's more issues with the number of schools. Because I appreciate the fact that they want to dedicate 2 sites, well, they have to dedicate sites no matter what, according to our formula. But what I'm trying to say is, what is Polk doing? I mean, especially the high schools are so expensive, they're $100 million schools. And if Polk is thinking about building a high school, I'm hesitant about taking on that dedicated site for high school when we may not need it.
Well, and if you don't need it, there's actually a provision.
We worked out a provision where if we don't want it,
It comes back. So we
comes
have
back, so we gotta put it back,
anticipated
yeah.
that in this agreement.
What I'm hearing is this, Joe, if I could interrupt you a second, just because you asked the question, what does the board want? What I understood, one, we got the process, Dr. Pace got that taken care of. You would like to know, what is Polk doing before you approve this, and what, if any, impact you can figure out down the road from what we learn, right? You wanna have a better understanding of the
geographic location. I don't want them just to get to take
The leftovers.
the site that's really not gonna be.
Now, remember what we got told is this is the site that the school staff picked based upon it. That needs to be explained to you more in depth. Right? And then I think those.
Like a perfect example, and because it's getting clearer as we're speaking now. Now that the site plan is still loosely developed, why don't we be proactive and go, well, I would like this site, instead of at the end, where like we said, Kindred's built out, and this is the only thing we got left, because if there's nowhere else here, there's nowhere else for the site to
But we
go.
picked
Why don't we
Kindred
be
as well.
proactive and say, hey, thank you, developer, for giving us these sites. Let us be, let's
It
play the
sounds
pick of the
like
litter
if
and
I
figure out
do
where to
that.
go.
We did that with
Mr. Osceola, I see you're speaking, I will recognize you, thank you. And I apologize, I am just trying to move the conversation along for several reasons, but mostly because I feel like we as board members might need to have further conversation to understand what we don't understand. So I'm wondering if, aside from the process change, of course, and tabling this with, being advised that this would be a little bit of an issue, but it's definitely within what we can do. If maybe we also just need to have a conversation just in general about this process, one-on-one with the stakeholders that are involved, so that we can better understand what gaps we have in understanding. Does that make sense? Does that, I feel like, because we all have different questions and issues within the same process. And Mrs. Thacker, you did say that you would be willing to sit with every one of us if we have those questions. Would that be something that the board is willing to take her up on, so that you can understand better?
Yeah, of course.
I'm only saying this because it sounds like we have different questions about the process. And I don't know that we would be able to solve all of those specific questions tonight.
And each entity kind of operates differently, so
Correct.
depending on the entity that we're dealing with, their process is different that we react to, which
But
then.
they all seem to have the same lawyer, so maybe if we work out a relationship with Joe, then apparently we're good.
I wish that I represented all of them, but I would love to have a relationship with you, with each of you, because I think it is important for the development community to understand, what your goals are, because I think they're very similar to each other of what they want. And so I think having the bigger conversation about where the development is coming, especially along the east side of Lake Tohope-Caliga, that's coming, and I know like some of them are already done and the school sites are already in place. But that's a big picture that if I can help, I don't represent Edgewater, but if I could help with a general understanding, I think that would be great and would love that opportunity.
Mr. Arguello, thank you. You also have, do you have
Yeah.
another comment?
I think I answered Ms. Thacker your question as if it had been posed by Ms. Blake. But to answer your question about what I want from the developers, what I would want is a more cooperative relationship, which we just kind of discussed, but with all the developers, because there's so many moving parts, right? And it hasn't really operated in partnership with the days, it's operated in relationships beyond the days. So
that to me is what's important. I think that the relationships between the developers and the school board should be more strategic when building up projects from nowhere, because that hasn't been the case, at least from my experience.
That'd be great.
So if there's no further discussion, I'm willing to TP 12.02 to August 3rd with a
August 3rd?
specific date.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Melendez to table item 12.02
I'll second.
I have a motion from Mr. Melendez to table item 12.02 until August 3rd. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, and I have a second from Mr. Arguello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I say one thing? I just wanted to tell you, Ms. Thacker has been one lawyer that has always, when we've been involved, understanding and driving how to protect the school system and marry her client with the school system so there's a win-win. She's not been like some other lawyers who Rhonda knows I don't care to deal with.
They just don't cooperate.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think that takes us through all of our information, through all of our consent agenda, is that correct?
Yes.
Great, so we do have, Sarah, you're speaking on item point 13.01, is that right? All right, thank you.
Good evening, school board members. Tonight we're presenting the 2021-22 proposed tentative budget. This presentation is for informational purposes only at this time. You will not be taking any action to approve the budget tonight. The budget being presented this evening is based on the conference report, our first FEFP calculation, that was released on April 27th. The Department of Education should release the second FEFP calculation later this week, which will then replace the estimated tax roll with the actual certified tax roll. Based on that information, we will make the necessary changes and present a tentative budget for your approval at the August 3rd public hearing. At this time, I would like to briefly walk you and the public through the budget and provide a summary of the information within the document. The first page of the document is a letter from the superintendent that outlines the goals of the district's strategic plan. As we work through the budget process, we're continuously ensuring that funds are allocated in alignment with these goals as set out by the school board. The next page provides a district overview, including the county population, projected FTE, and number of district employees. The pie chart in the middle of the page reflects the funding from federal, state, and local sources and the breakdown of schools by type. The graph at the bottom of the page summarizes the operating budget by major category. Next, we have the table of contents, and then that brings us to the introduction section. On page I-2, we have the budget timeline. The highlighted sections are the board meetings related to the budget process as required by the Truth in Millage Act, or TRIM. Tonight, we're presenting a proposed tentative budget. The public hearing to adopt the tentative budget and millage rates will be held on August 3rd. Then the public hearing to adopt the final budget and millage will be held on September 7th. Following the timeline are our standard budget conventions. This section provides definitions and additional details regarding the development of the budget. The graph on page 1-6 provides a historical overview of the district's FTE over the last 10 years. The total projection for the 2021-22 school year is 71,901 FTE, or full-time equivalent students, which represents an increase of 2,706 FTE over the 2020-21 year. The next couple of pages provide FTE projections by school. And then we have the property appraiser's office had certified the tax roll on June 30th of this year. Line 4 of the certification reflects the gross taxable value of $36.5 billion. The certified amount is $610 million more than DOE's initial estimate in the conference report. The proposed millage rate may be adjusted when the certified tax roll is incorporated into the second FEFP calculation. The graph on page 1-11 provides historical data relative to the property tax millage rates and levies over the last 10 years. You can see how the total millage rate has decreased while the tax roll continues to increase. The next page compares the fourth FEFP calculation for 2021 to the 2022 conference report. The base student allocation of $4,373 can be found on line 15. This is an increase of $53 per student over the prior year. At the bottom of the page on line 52, there is an increase in total funding of $22.7 million, and right below that you'll see that this equates to a $33 increase per student, or 0.44% increase. Page 1-13 shows the change in total FEFP funding and funding per student since the 2014-15 school year. Although funding levels have increased over the last several years, it is important to note that a large part of the additional funding per student has been allocated to restricted programs, such as Safe Schools, Mental Health, Best and Brightest bonuses, and the current teacher salary allocation. The next page shows a statewide ranking of funding per student, with Osceola currently ranked 61 out of 67 school districts. The next several pages define and describe the different components of the FEFP. As part of statutory requirements, the board will also adopt a policy for the expenditure of lottery funds as part of its tentative budget. On page 1-21 is the proposed policy for fiscal year 2021-22. No funds have been allocated for school recognition and discretionary lottery funding for this fiscal year. On page 1-22 is a summary of the overall budget by fund. The detail supporting this summary is in subsequent sections of the budget document. The top right section shows the total proposed millage of 6.001 mils. And the bottom right reflects the total proposed budget of over $1.7 billion. Since the certified tax roll for Osceola is greater than the estimate used in the conference report, we do expect to see a slight decrease in the RLE millage rate to net the same revenue from local collections. The next section of the budget document presents samples of the resolutions to adopt the tentative millage rates and tentative budget. The amounts will be updated based on DOE's second FEFP calculation, and we will be seeking approval of these resolutions at the public hearing on August 3rd. TRIM requires the board to publish specific advertisements related to the budget. The next few pages are samples of the following advertisements. First is the notice of budget hearing. However, if the proposed millage rate exceeds the rollback rate, we are required to publish a notice of proposed tax increase instead, and that is what we expect to be advertising. The rollback rate is the millage rate that would generate the same amount of revenue as last year if applied to the current year adjusted taxable value. So we do expect our required rate to be higher than that. The budget summary ad is next, which is similar to the budget summary we discussed earlier, except for the exclusion of the internal service fund. And last, we have the notice of tax for school capital outlay. The final versions of these ads will be published in the Orlando Sentinel on Thursday, July 29th, as required by TRIM guidelines. The general fund budget is the operating budget for the district. It accounts for most of the district's salaries and benefits and other operating costs such as utilities, fuel, supplies, and equipment. Page 1-3 is the long-range forecast for the general fund. The 2020-21 figures are still estimates at this time, as we're currently in the process of closing out last fiscal year. However, we do expect that we will end the year with a balanced budget as planned. For the 2021-22 year, our current proposal is an operating surplus of $1.1 million, which will allow us to maintain a financial condition ratio of 10.6%. The general fund budget summary provides the same information with additional detail. On the schedule, estimated revenues are presented by funding source and appropriations presented by major category. Pages 1-5 through 1-7 are supporting schedules. Each of these schedules also compares the 2021-22 tentative budget to the 2020-21 adopted budget. Page 1-8 shows the detailed SAI or Supplemental Academic Instruction budget. Several programs previously funded through SAI have been shifted to ESSER funding for the period of the ESSER grant. The resulting savings to the SAI budget are being held in reserve. Page 1-9 shows the detailed budget of the reading allocation. And the next 2 pages show the detail of the Safe Schools allocation, which we're using to support our school resource officers, along with supplemental line item funding to support the additional Safe Schools initiatives. Beginning on page 1-12 is the full list of line item allocations, resulting in a net $500,000 reduction in line items over the prior year. Switching gears from the operating budget, the debt service fund accounts for all of the district's long-term debt. Similar to schedules in the general fund, a summary of revenues and appropriations is included with a year-to-year comparison of the budget. The summary is then followed by supporting schedules by fund. Pages 2-7 and 2-8 list future debt service payments through 2034. The total principal amount outstanding is currently $303.9 million. The sum of principal and interest payments through 2034 is $339.5 million. The debt capacity analysis on page 2-9 shows the amount of 1.5 mil capital outlay funding that is obligated for the repayment of debt. At the bottom of the page, the percent indebted measures that amount as a percentage of revenue. Since the district has not issued debt to build new schools in recent years, this percent indebted continues to decline as the district pays off old debt. Revenue and expenditure activity related to the construction and renovation of the district's buildings and grounds are reported in the Capital Projects Fund. The major sources of revenue for the Capital Projects Fund include impact fees, 1.5 mil capital outlay tax, and sales tax. Page 3-3 is a summary of the 5-year capital plan, which is then followed by detailed plans broken down between capacity sources and non-capacity sources. On page 3-4, you'll see that this plan includes funding for the construction of 3 new K-8 schools within the next 5 years. On page 3-5, funding has been provided for maintenance and renovation of our facilities, along with funding for buses, student computers, and additional technology items. Following the capital plan are standard schedules for revenues and appropriations and supporting schedules by fund. Excuse me. The remainder of the capital projects section details the appropriations for safety and security, technology, capital renewal, and deferred maintenance projects, including carryovers. Next, we have the Special Revenue Fund, which is used to record the activity of the food service program and federal grants. The food service budget can be found on pages 4-5 and 4-6. Despite intentional efforts to spend down reserves, the food service fund balance has continued to increase due to federal programs and increased reimbursement rates available throughout the pandemic. The fiscal year 2021-22 budget reflects a continuation of our spend down plan in this area. The following pages detail all other federal grants. The CARES Act, ESSER funds, and ARC funding are included on pages 4-13 and 4-14 and appropriated in accordance with the district's multi-year spending plan for these funds. The final section of the document is the Internal Service Fund budget. This fund accounts for the district's self-insured group health and life insurance and casualty insurance programs. The board's contributions for employee coverage and deductions for dependent coverage are recorded in this fund. Again, standard schedules summarizing estimated revenues and appropriations are followed by supporting schedules. Pages 5-5 and 5-6 show the costs associated with the Health Insurance Trust Fund. This budget includes no changes to the plan design or employee premiums for the upcoming plan year. However, as we continue to experience cost savings as a result of our new health services plan, a premium holiday is planned for the following fiscal year which will result in additional savings for our employees. The final 2 pages of the document.
Sarah, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I may. Does that mean there's gonna be 2 holidays, or does that mean just because we had one already, right? Like this year?
No, we have not had one this year.
There was one planned? What was I thought that we did have one this year.
There's one planned for the upcoming school year.
Right.
Remember that we are still in negotiations with OCEA for our teacher contract, our instructional unit, and also we are still in negotiations with Teamsters. So last year, they had a 1-year contract agreement that they gave the instructional salary allocation and for the Teamsters a 3% bonus. We settled with ESP for 3 years, so it was the 3% bonus with 30 cents an hour raise, and then we've settled with them for 22-23 to have a premium holiday at the beginning of the fiscal year, and to also then have a bonus was what we agreed to. So we're still in negotiations, but right now the proposal is one planned holiday at the beginning of the 22-23 school year.
The one that we've discussed is the one that you're referring to?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I know this is.
It has been bargained with the ESP unit.
Yeah,
And the
I'm not so
intent is
sure
for
that should be
everyone.
a bargaining situation, right? I mean, if we're really providing them with the holiday, it shouldn't be a tactic or a strategic element in a bargaining situation. We should just be providing them the holiday.
It has to do with wages and benefits, so it's a required bargaining.
Yeah, well then maybe we should retool how we present that so that it's not, so that we reduce our premiums to the employees then as opposed to, right? Because then that wouldn't be part of the bargaining if it were just less, right? Because we mandate that cost, it's not something that we negotiate. So, it's just my 2 cents, but don't
I'm not
just.
sure I'm
just
following
continue.
your
I just think that
question,
their
but
premium
I
should
think
be
that's a
less,
bargaining topic
right? If
we
we're
probably
saving
need
the
to
money,
discuss
then
in
we
terms
should
of
be.
bargaining strategy.
Yeah, it should not be part of the bargaining strategy and then we walk away like we're giving them something. We should just be providing our employees with a reduced expense instead of it being part of our negotiations with the
We
OC.
have an executive meeting coming up with regards to.
It's my intention to
Okay,
propose one
so
for
that might be a good topic to talk about then.
I think that's the appropriate time for that
Yeah.
conversation. Okay?
Oh wait, did you
Yeah,
have any
continue.
other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Almost done, just 2 more pages. The final 2 pages of the document show the activity related to the casualty loss fund, which includes our property and workers' compensation insurance programs. Controlling these expenses will continue to be an area of intentional focus for the upcoming year. And that concludes my presentation. However, I'm available to answer any questions you all have about the proposed tentative budget at this time.
Or do we have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I tried to read this several times and I fell asleep after trying to take this giant binder clip off.
That's why I think it's worth taking just a few minutes to walk everyone through it.
Thank you.
But certainly Sarah is also available anytime between now and August the 3rd to meet with any of you individually.
Okay, moving right along, the other information items, we do not have any speakers and the attachments are there if you guys need to take a look at them. Let's go ahead and move on to our regular agenda. I know that we are pulling item 17.02 under superintendent's recommendations. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
14.03.
14.03?
That's regular.
We're in
We are
regular now.
regular, yeah.
So I think you could just take them by category.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and, so under deputy superintendent, I have 14.03. Okay, under, do we have, actually, let me just pull them all and then we'll discuss. Under human resources, do we have anything?
Yeah, first you have to do regular for the deputy superintendent.
I wanna know if we need to pull anything. Can I do that before we?
Well, if you
just need to
take them
go
one
through
by
each one.
one, you don't have to pull them.
Okay, great.
Or you
So,
can do them all if nobody has any questions, just depending.
okay, I was trying to set something in my head, but let's just move on. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at deputy superintendent. I know that we're pulling one item, so I'm gonna ask for a vote on 14.01. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
How about the,
1401.
pardon,
I'm
Is
only
that the-
working with
Yes.
superintendent.
is that the one where, 1401, is that the one where we allocate I always get confused, there's two items. There's one that was a list of vendors that can bill Medicaid in order to receive services. Is that 1401? Or is this just the plan as a whole?
This is the allocation plan, which includes the health threat application. If you wanna take a couple of minutes to take a look at that.
Yeah, because the issue that I had on this one, because I'm sorry, just because there's so much things on this agenda. Because I had a discussion with Dr. Pace earlier on mental health for students that exhibit certain behaviors to then get triggered for service right away.
Okay.
Like if somebody gets a detention or expulsion, and we even talked about it, because at first my concept was if they got recommended, but not even if they got recommended, I mean, not before we make the final order, if they just get recommended for expulsion, I wanna know what's going on,
Is
you know what I mean,
this
so
the
that's
item
part of
that
the
we
plan.
need to discuss this in, or is it another item?
Item 14.01 is required as a part of the mental health allocation from categorical from the state, where we have to provide a comprehensive plan each year for how we're gonna utilize those additional dollars. And as you heard during our legislative update, there's an extra 20 million across the state as a part of that categorical. And so this is the comprehensive plan of all the different things that we do with those particular funds. In terms of the procedure that you talked about, for which kids are getting referred for mental health services, I've already had communication with Ms. Bungo, and that's an internal procedure that we can put into place. Not maybe for a kid who gets a lunch detention, but certainly for kids who have significant issues. And we've been doing that already through our student services team in Goal 5 by having our guidance, our school counselors and our SROs and our deans all learning to work together. So we're looking at the whole child to make sure we're not missing anything.
Yes, I remember now, yeah, and that's how it integrates into the plan. Because if we have an increased level of service, now I'm talking like a police officer that we did this in our task force. If we start asking people to start seeing more mental health consults because they meet certain criteria, red flags, we may need to allocate more staff to fund it. So that's where they kind of tied in. So it's like, you know what I'm trying to say? So it's not just a directive like, yeah, let's just see them. And when we see them, next thing you know, we have like 200 new cases. Do we have enough manpower or staff to be able to satisfy all those requests in a timely manner, you know?
Question, I do believe though, and I'm just taking a cursory, that might be part of the plan itself. Is that included in here?
We have added additional school counselors and psychologists and social workers over the course of the last 5 years, specifically to meet those needs. And then we also have the contracted services with outside providers. In addition, you'll see in this plan that all staff members have been trained in the youth mental health first aid, which provides opportunity for all of us to be able to identify when there are triggers and also information about where we would go to make sure that a child gets help if they need it. I mean, it's obviously not 100%, we're constantly always trying to get better at everything we do, but we're constantly upgrading that training and identification, not so that we're asking, Mrs. Pace to be the guidance counselor if she doesn't have that training, but we are gonna ask Mrs. Pace to notice if a kid has issues or is struggling with something, that we're gonna refer them to the right trained people who can provide services.
Page 11.
Okay. And I guess I missed it before, it was on consent, so it was mental health service, I guess it was 9.01, because again, and that's where I spoke with the local vendor and I was like, hey, how come you didn't apply to get to the mental health? And, I don't wanna name them out, but they're not here, but they did text me, they go, yes, but they require a lot of paperwork and tracking, which essentially needs a full-time employee to dedicate to that. And they also said some of the therapists were receiving pushback from school staff with very little space opportunities, like when are they gonna get in there, and some other issues. And so I just wanna let you know, and I think it was 9.01 on the consent, and I'm sorry, I forgot to pull that one. So I did intentionally wanna talk about 1401, the plan itself of allocating enough resources to deal with students that have behavioral issues. And then 901 was when we contract with outside vendors, because I knew one of them right away, there was like a helping hand, I'll just discuss it, they're not afraid because I had that conversation.
Mr. Melendez, may I ask just for some order, if you would like to discuss an item that we've already voted on, can we add it to your board member
To the new
comments?
business, yes,
That
okay.
would be great.
So 1401 specifically then is just the plan, I just wanna make sure the allocation plan has resources in it to accommodate the increased bandwidth and student services being identified because of behavioral issues.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Arguello?
Yeah, for me, I wanted to mention this plan because I thought that it lacked an element, and maybe I missed it, but I read through it, an element that addressed the influx of immigration that's coming into our community, and then getting those students to be able to integrate themselves and begin performing as well as possible immediately. So I think that because of the extra money that's coming, that this would be a good place to focus some of that money, because it happens to be something that is gonna be pulling resources, initially it's gonna be pulling resources, and we may have them.
Are we concerned in particular about some of the unrest in Haiti and Cuba? I know I saw in Miami-Dade that that's a concern right now, that they're seeing that, and certainly we saw it after Hurricane Maria.
I think exactly Hurricane Maria is kind of exactly one of the things that may be coming down the road. And also just the number of people moving to Central Florida, right? Just, there's a lot of immigration, this is an immigration hotspot, and making sure that those students can integrate successfully, this may be the area where it may be helpful.
I appreciate that, sir. We'll certainly take that to the team.
All right, so motion to approve 1401 as submitted with direction from the superintendent to allow for students with certain behaviors to be identified to receive treatment.
Mr. Bass already made a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My apologies.
No, I didn't realize that, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you seconded?
You can amend.
I'll amend that, yes, how about that, I'll withdraw my motion and then second yours.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay, great, so it sounds like I have a motion for, by Mr. Melendez, a second by Mr. Bass, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, vote passes 4-0. 1402,
Motion approved.
I thought that you pulled that one. Did you pull
1403 was the pulled one.
03, okay, I second that one, 1403.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Melendez, and a second by Mr. Bass to approve 14.02, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Mr. Arguello, you have a question or comment about 14.03?
Yes, this is a contract for $780 million, 790,000, not millions, sorry. That would have been our whole budget. But, and it's basically how to get kids back in school, is that correct?
Yes,
Right.
sir, and it's a requirement for this segment of the ESSER funds, which are outside of the district's overall allocation. There's a specific dollar amount that has to be spent on finding lost kids, because we have been effective in not having a lot of lost kids throughout the year. The team's recommendation is that we really focus strongly on attendance, because we know that our digital students kind of got lax about necessarily attending. Overall, our district attendance rate went from between 94 and 95%, 89% for face-to-face learners and 88% for digital. So that's what these dollars would go for. For staff, and this particular organization is a group that we met out of Harvard. They provide direct communication through emails, through calls, through text messages, and they identify those based on things that have worked. And then there's also a team that supports the follow-up to get these kids back in school on a consistent basis.
Are we hiring anybody in support of this program?
Yes, that is a part of the attendance plan, isn't it? May I ask Elizabeth, just to make sure I know for sure? There was a
We
whole,
are actually, do you want me to come up?
please come up to the podium.
My name's Elizabeth Lane. We are actually advertising now and hiring 13 additional staff members to work with our schools to make sure that we are finding not only finding those students, but providing support to those parents, finding out why their students aren't in school, how we can connect them with community resources to get them in school, what we need to do to get them in school.
So people who will facilitate their return, essentially, like that's what their
Yes,
job
sir.
will be, right, essentially? And it just seemed like, I kind of read through the contract, it seems like an inordinate amount of money, because we don't have very few students that didn't come back, right? So like per student, if you break this contract down per student, it's just a very expensive contract. And I didn't think we had that much of a problem, but this is a mandated number. Right.
This specific amount, but the overall amount that has to be spent on this particular purpose is a mandated number, yes.
Was this the same vendor that we used from last year? I think I had this conversation with you.
Yes, and I provided you with some of the data that showed the contacts that they made and the work that they had done.
Okay, so it's the same one, they're basically continuing it, so it's not like we're changing vendors mid-course, just for the record to make it clear.
And Dr. Pace, if I can clarify, it's not just about finding kids, but it's about chronic absenteeism. So if you have a student that's out 2 days or more a month, 18 days a year, then the research shows being able to read on a third grade level drops proportionally, graduating drops proportionally. So the focus isn't just on finding kids who are absent, but it's making sure that parents understand the importance of having their children in school every day, on time, and working with them if they don't understand that to help educate them and link them to resources.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why and the purposes. If it's the same contractor, then they definitely did a good job. During COVID, it just was a huge jump in money. So 3 times the amount.
3-year contract.
It's a 3-year contract as opposed to 1 year.
Yeah, it's $250, okay, that's something I overlooked then, thank you very
No,
much.
one thing though from the district, because I did meet with Ms. Lane before, and I think I had mentioned that before, because we had some truancy issues with some parents talking to me earlier. Can we as a district define chronic absenteeism? Because I'm hearing that some parents are dropping the kids off like 4 hours at the end of the school day, and it doesn't count as a late. It counts as a tardy, not as a missed day. You miss 4 hours of school, to me, that's like my own definition. Now, the state statute can have its own definition. We're allowed to have our own definitions to create internal timelines to get moved up, to try to get these parents to know, wait a second, 4 hours late is not a late. You know what I'm trying to say? And so I think that's something that the board direction has to kind of give me. To say, yes, let's create our own triggers for red flags. And now that we're paying this company some good money and they're successful at what they're doing, tracking down COVID kids, let's start getting, because to me, 4 hours is way too much. I mean, I don't know what that magic number is, Superintendent. I'd like for you to maybe come back and tell us what that would be, because it has nothing to do with approving this contract. It's more like an internal discussion of when that contract gets executed for notifying parents, because 4 hours is way too long. To me, it's like a lateness in my books, regardless of what the state statute says.
We certainly can come back and discuss additional procedures with the board.
Thank you. Do we have all of our questions answered for
Yes, ma'am.
this particular item? Okay, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, motion to approve item 1403 with the superintendent getting back to us and letting us know what is considered, late time versus not a late time to be considered for our internal reporting purposes.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Melendez, a second by Mr. Arguello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. 14, that's it? Okay. Is there anything on 15 that we need to take a look at individually?
We can go to 1503. Motion approved, I'm sorry.
Move to approve 1503.
I have a motion from Mr. Bass, a second by Mr. Melendez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you. And that brings us over to item 17. I know.
16.0.
Sorry, item 16.01.
Yeah, I have a question about it.
Great, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and recognize Mr. Bass first and Mr. Melendez.
No, Mr. Bass.
I heard his first.
Frank, I got a question for you on this one.
Yes.
I'm just having a little bit of heartache on spending, let me make sure that it's getting late, so I'm make sure that my thought is correct.
I was like,
This was the one that they were gonna give impact fee credits to redesign the stacking area out here.
I think we've taken that out and we're not using, when it was brought to my attention.
Can we use the quarter?
We can, but it would take board action to
Right.
change the funding.
So right now, this funding said impact fee credits, when I think impact fee credits should be building schools.
To do it
Yeah.
with sales tax.
With sales tax.
Okay,
When you
well
move
then-
to approve it, make a motion to approve it utilizing sales tax dollars, not impact fee dollars.
Yeah, I think that's
Are
what
there any
needs to be correction.
I apologize for interrupting.
Well, he had a
Mr.
question though
Bass.
first, that was-
Again, I keep repeating things because to me, process is important too. It's not specific on this. This is again, man, I really sound like a broken record. This is the first time I hear about this. And what happens is, this is important and it may be the most meritorious project, but what it does is, we only have so much money and it changes the order of the queue. You know what I mean? So if this is going, something else isn't going. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that the board should be having a discussion to say, okay, before we approve it, say, hey, this became an issue. And Mr. Bass knew about it, but this is the first time I hear about it. Because what if I had in my brain that, hey, another schools like Oxa's, back road in the back is getting done, did this get pushed back further now? And I'm like, wait a second, well, Oxa's kind of a priority. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening in this issue, but again, I'm talking about process. So next time somebody has a special request to divert funding for a specific project, that they bring it to the board and we have a discussion, okay, does it affect anything in the timeline? Or do we have the budget? If it doesn't affect timeline and budget, then we approve it, no problem. But if it says, hey, Ox is gonna get delayed for 2 months or a year, and we're not gonna build the back loop and broke because we're spending the money here that we had pledged there, then I just think that it's about a process thing, that I shouldn't be seeing this for the first time on an agenda to approve it to get it funded. That when it became an issue to be addressed, then we should have, at the board, be notified at that time to say, hey, there's an issue at Neptune, there's a problem. Maybe we could do research and find out other alternatives. We would have found out the impact fee versus, sales tax. So to me, it's more of a process concern. So I'm okay with approving this now because I don't wanna make this a big thing, but it's a recurring theme that I really wanna reform the way this board operates and make sure that we have special funding requests brought up to the board at the initial stages so we can see how those long-term implications are and rearrange the budget.
This might be, again, a larger conversation, and I wonder if it has to do with maybe having a more comprehensive facilities workshop and possibly even more often. I think
It's
that
not even
that's.
comprehensive, just emergencies happen. What if
When
they just
I-
happen?
sure,
They just need to
I
let us
mean-
know earlier
I
in the
mean-
process.
I mean, giving us more information than what we're currently getting in the facilities workshops. Typically, what we see is things that are coming up very soon in our agenda versus, we have several examples to of things that are kind of in a larger timeline. So that might be the conversation that we need to have so that this board feels more comfortable making those kinds of decisions. So I'll just bring that up as maybe an alternative or,
Because that's an exact question I have. Not that this isn't meritorious of funding,
Sure.
but what gets pushed back because we approved this now? I mean, like, what got delayed to get this moving forward? And if the answer is nothing got delayed, we're just flush with cash and we got staff that has time on their hands to work on this project, then merry go away. But sometimes, even if we have money, staff may be dedicated on another project and the timeline might have moved down the line. So what got bumped back, if any, that would be my only concern. Not that this project isn't meritorious of being funded and being supported.
There's funding each year in the capital budget that the board approves for cyclical capital projects that come up during the course of the year. Because we know that some things are gonna have an opportunity to come forward that we maybe didn't anticipate. But we didn't take anything off of the board's approved priority list in order to bring this forward. And as of right now, we're looking at the design before anything is actually constructed that would come back to the board as a project for your consideration. But I understand, and as Ms. Castillo has suggested, I think a longer workshop about that process is probably warranted.
So I'll move to approve 1601 with the changes that it will be funded through sales tax rather than impact fee credits.
Actually, let me finish. Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Bass
I second that motion.
and a second by Mr. Melendez. I do have a comment. I don't know how, I have a comment and I don't know that there's anybody here to answer it. Is there any consideration that I need to be concerned about by using a different sort of funding? No? Okay, great.
They pre-cleared that with me.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I have a motion by Mr. You have a question?
Sorry. Well, the fact is we don't have the issue, right? I mean, we don't have the document, so shouldn't we just, they're gonna change the funding on this documentation, which is gonna change language throughout the documentation. Shouldn't we just have it rewritten and resubmitted?
Or you can amend the motion to say we wanted to include
My
the
direction is
language.
gonna be, if you approve it with his motion, then I've gotta go through the agreement, make the changes that it clearly reflects its sales tax dollars.
Okay, fantastic. Motion by Mr. Bass, second by Mr. Melendez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0, and I believe we're in 17. I know we have one item pulled in 17.02. Dr. Pace, you have any discussions?
I would just simply say that 17.01, I shared with the board my intention to bring forward on July the 1st in my board update.
Yes.
While I was on vacation, I just became more and more stressed and uncomfortable with where we are in the guardian training, and I know that the board had some discomfort as well with that process. So it is my recommendation that we permit 2 of our staff members who volunteered and started the training yesterday with the understanding that should the board decide to go in a different direction today, they'll go back to their regular duties tomorrow, to complete the guardian training, to provide us with that sense of assurance of that depth and quality of training. I know that Mr. Melendez has spoken with one of those individuals and has received assurance that they will be candid in their response, and with the understanding that neither one of them would act in a guardian role until we come back to the board with changes in policy and a job description that would allow them to do that as a supplement to their current assigned duties, and that I have no intention as the superintendent to recommend expansion or growth of a guardian program in our school district. I firmly support the board's upcoming resolution, and place great value on school resource officers in all of our schools for all the reasons that we've already discussed. But I also have, as superintendent, some discomfort in terms of where we are with this situation and the lack of control that I feel like we have to ensure that I have someone at every school every hour of every day, that students aren't present to meet the requirements of the statute and the administrative rules that were just passed this summer. So that's my recommendation for 17.01, and I would ask that we pull 17.02 because we have no authority for that contract to move forward without the piggyback piece.
Okay, well, I'll move to approve 1701.
Second with discussion.
I have a motion by Mr. Bass, a second by Mr. Melendez with discussion. All those in favor?
You had discussion, didn't you?
Yes.
Is it,
Yeah.
but you're,
Discussion.
okay.
That's okay, it's late.
I don't know.
It's late, Madam Chair.
We can just go on, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm that Dr. Pace, and I did speak with her and have the assurance, because again, I did the task force and I got to really know this issue intimately. Unfortunately, the law enforcement agencies are kind of like pushing on us, and we'll talk about the SRO contract later on the other one. But at the end of the day, I think it is prudent, because I have been looking at other jurisdictions like Hillsborough County, Duval County, and they all have some kind of hybrid approach at some point in time. And these guys are both directors. I don't see them as full-time guardians. It's like a worst-case scenario insurance policy, the sky falls, there's nobody at the school, Kissimmee, it could be an emergency. Let's say KPD had a desire to put an SRO. A huge mass casualty incident occurs, they have to pull them, and they need everybody to be there, and then worst-case scenario, they cover that as a floater. So I don't see Ryan Adams, our Director of Athletics, or Russell Gold working full-time as a guardian, because they make more being district administrators, providing value to that extent. And then I did in fact have that conversation with Mr. Adams, and I discussed it with the superintendent, so she's aware of it, that I want an honest assessment though. That's the only thing about it. I want Mr. Adams to tell us, what is the curriculum like? Is it good? Is it not good? I want honest feedback. Does it have enough, curriculum? Does it too much firearms? I want them to give us, so in a way, I'm kind of curious to see how the sheriff actually implements the training program. And is he meeting the standards that we think that would be successful? So I think if anything, that has value in itself, that we actually got people studying the program and giving us that valuable feedback on whether or not it's appropriate. So I just want to let them know that, again, echo the superintendent, it's not that I want to use guardians, the law enforcement agencies. Again, I'll save it for the SRO contract, but they didn't even want to have a long-term contract with us. So they're indicating that they don't want to participate with us very amicably. So we have to do this, we're almost like forced in a corner to at least address it. And I think, and I thank you, Dr. Pace, for being candid with me and keeping me up to date on that from the very beginning. So I would support this, wholeheartedly moving forward.
Thank you. Do we have Mr. Arguello?
Yeah. Does that mean that these 2 individuals will be armed on campus?
Not until or unless we change board policy. They can't actually perform the guardian role even after they complete the training without a change in board policy and the establishment of a job description. Even though it wouldn't be a full-time job description, it would be a supplemented position. So that was my other assurance to you.
But this issue here also provides for the purchase of the arms and the safe and.
Yeah, what is he stored?
We have to have equipment in order for them to even complete the training. We're borrowing some right now. But like I said, it doesn't mean that it would be used until it comes back to the board as a policy change.
That's a
for the
technicality,
doctor.
though. Where would it be
Well,
stored?
yeah, so
If
where-
we
where-
buy the gun, where does he hold it? I mean, after the training is completed, where does it get stored?
It's gonna get secured here in a place that nobody can get to.
There's a
Like,
specific.
Security purposes, we don't need to say exactly
Dr.
specific.
Pace ran,
Mr. Kaufman,
I got you.
turn.
It's fine.
Dr. Pace ran this by me. I strongly legally supported this because we ultimately, with the state, get accountable to constantly check on the charter schools. So we need to understand what we're checking on. And right now, we have no idea because nobody sat with the superintendent or staff and said, here's how we're gonna train people. So we're gonna embed them, but those guns are not gonna be walking around this district.
Without us knowing.
Exactly.
Correct.
So, but they will be being paid the supplement.
If they fully complete the training, I felt like they deserve something
I'm okay,
for
I'm all
adding
for,
that
I'm
onto
all for
their-
people getting paid more, so it's that, I got no issues.
They're giving up their Fridays because they have to go to training 5 days a week.
I'd rather have my Friday than the $750. Okay, he's already got a motion, right? Are you ready?
No, I seconded the motion, to
Oh,
Robert's
okay.
motion.
Okay, so once again, motion by Mr. Bass, second by Mr. Melendez, all those in favor?
Aye.
Vote passes 4-0, we're pulling 7.02 and we're good. Now is a time that we take a moment to acknowledge the public. I do not have any public comments, is there anybody out?
Wait, we didn't go to 1702, did we?
We pulled it.
No, we pulled it.
Oh, okay, that was both of them? Okay,
What,
yeah, no, it's true.
got it? Okay.
But we did all, at once, okay, gotcha.
Yes, because it was, and they worked in tandem. Thank you. Do we have any public comments? I don't have any here. May I have them, please?
Oh, he doesn't have a pen.
I got one.
Thank you.
I need you to say it for the name and record now for time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes. Thank
You
you
need a
so
pen,
much.
Oswald?
Here you go.
Hello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Willie Valencia. I'm from Zion TCM of Florida. Zion TCM of Florida, we are a certified company and we are a member for the mental health Central Florida. And eventually, I'm here for the point 1401 for about the mental health. Zion TCM, we are professional mental health targeted case management, and we are coordinate, link, assess, advocate, and provide resources for all kind of our kids for the district of Osceola. So I'm here to ask you to give us the opportunity to provide all the mental health disorders services for all the kids for the schools. So in the future, I'm gonna present a proposal for a project to work and offer to you how we do maybe a presentation or any kind of whatever you request. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Are you registered with vendor link, sir?
Pardon me?
I think a good first step would be registered with vendor link.
Yes.
And if you haven't, we can have staff help.
That is quite coincidental that I didn't imagine come here, but I'm here in the meeting when you see mental health, and at this time, after the pandemic, we are very, very busy and we planning to present a project only for the school. Especially we are our offices here in Kissimmee, so that is why I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for being proactive as well. Do you have another one? And actually, do we need to keep that or we do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you'll fill that out, then I can be sure to have staff.
Anyone in
follow up.
particular?
Right here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jose Martinez, address.
I got someone in your government in St. Cloud. Also, I'm a business owner out of St. Cloud as well. And I want to first of all thank you all. I think for giving me the opportunity to be able to this podium and be able to address you guys. I think it's a blessing, it's a pleasure, as we don't have to be discussing nothing but great things of what's going on here. I think I came in with my friend, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do as school board, as a district, and like any state, federal, local government. There's a lot of room to cover to earn the public respect. And I think you guys going on the right direction. I see it, but there's a lot more to cover. I see a lot of talk about budget, and this is basically the second time, really the first time that I'm here. I would say general public and listening. And, oh my gosh, I see there's a lot going on, right? Maybe I understand half of it, maybe less than that. But most importantly, on this budget, as you guys discussing it, what I'm wondering is, what are we doing for the local companies, local communities? I'm a small business owner, and I've seen this budget, and I don't see much of it. So if you allow me to give my humble opinion and ideas, I think I want to bring forward this beautiful district. What if we can create, you guys are the ones with authority, an MBE program? I think that's really overdue. But we have many vendors, like in many others. Not me, I think I'm in the cell phone industry. But many other locally that can address you guys if we follow through the right process, bringing on board and have our local companies be able to serve the need also of the community. I think there's a lot to be done with that area. I'm not an expertise, nor I try to be one. I just see it, living in this area, in this community for many, many years. There's a lot more that can be done. So if you allow me to bring this humble idea, I think we can definitely do a lot better. I'll be the pleasure of being once, I think, in the Trust, Transparency, and Good Governance Task Force, when we start where you lead. And I learned a lot, one time. And the rest, this is my second time being here. I said, wow, there's a lot that I want to learn. And I encourage also the people, the public to also engage. I love it. Like I said, a lot more tonight. But please, if you guys take my recommendation, maybe Mr. Gray, can lead it. We definitely, I encourage you guys maybe to vote or bring it on. How can we create an MBE program that we allow the local companies, small businesses, to participate more with the school district? So if you guys can maybe do that tonight, make it public, we definitely need, and I would encourage you to bring our local companies engaged. I have not seen one yet. Maybe there's many. I have not seen one. So I will leave that, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to attorney's reports.
Yes. The first item for you is approval of the school board resource officer contract for 2021 to 22. You got some last minute changes, one of which was inserting and getting an agreement that to the extent drugs are confiscated at a school, the officer there will do the test. That insulates our staff from anybody claiming that they did something with the testing and they're experienced at it. It does open one door, and I have to tell you, we haven't seen it, but I just want you to be aware. And each department said to me they agreed that the risk is not really there, but should they, for example, confiscate heroin or phenobarbital, they're more likely going to arrest because that's a far more serious offense and try and find out where that's coming from. We have not had those issues, but I just want everybody to know because we're going to do everything we can to save these students. They would not agree to a 3-year term. I tried. I want to thank first Curtis McGehee at the City of Kissimmee, who literally the next morning he got it, he had the deputy chief and him on the phone. And I want to thank Deb Barrett at the Sheriff's Office because she acted quickly when she knew we had to get this done. So I think we put in a lot of things that you wanted, Julius, in there.
Yes, sir.
And my recommendation is to move forward with it. If you wanna make a tweak to it, I gotta go back to everybody, but we need this thing. I'd rather we approved it and then say, can you go back and see if you can get this changed? So that we have an agreement to get these people in place.
The only thing I'll do on the testing of the drugs,
Yeah.
and you don't have to put that in there, it's like one of those things that's internally, that staff can attest to the fact or witness it, and they're allowed to witness that they conducted the test.
That will be part of, when we go over this, so that principals understand the nuances, they'll be told, the officer guys have somebody standing there watching it so that they can validate the officer did the test.
And again, I wanna thank the superintendent and both the school board attorney, that a lot of the recommendations did in fact make their way in here. So the whole task force wasn't in vain. I mean, we didn't get the body cameras, but we're getting on a resolution. But I will see that, I saw here that, we want them to go inside the classroom and teach classes. I saw that they want them to liaison with the state attorneys and, require civil citations. I saw the drug testing. So I saw a lot of the things that we recommended were now in fact in there. So I wanna thank you, Dr. Pace, for doing that, because it could have been a little bit more resistance, but it wasn't. And so, and I understand the parts that were eliminated were included in the resolution, because I understand contract language, we have to have a contract to go. And the resolution at least lets them know that, hey, this is what we expect and this is what we want. So I do appreciate you again, Dr. Pace, for being able to separate that and in getting the new language in there. So I really wanna thank you for everything and for even attending the meetings. That's the other thing I forgot about that. I forgot to appreciate you for that. You saw about after hours, you came to every task force meeting except for one, and, Mr. Phelps was there and in your absence, so that means that you still cared about the entire thing. And so, on behalf of the SRO task force members, I think Jamise Lewis was here earlier, Stephen Montero, the chairman, Tatiana Chafin. I don't wanna name every single one of them, but I wish they were here. I just, the fact is, they were all volunteers. No one got paid, and they really did their due diligence, and it's showing up here in this document. And so I wanna thank all the SRO task force members that volunteered and helped put this together and make sure that we're getting something solid. But I am disappointed though, that it wasn't a 3-year deal, that it wasn't a commitment. And I had mentioned it before, I think Channel 2 was speaking earlier, that, we had a task force meeting where the possibility of elementary schools were coming next. And so I wanted to try to get a 3-year agreement to try to shield us from that possibility. But unfortunately, they said no, and that's when I accepted Dr. Pace's agreement to go ahead and at least train the 2 district personnel for the guardians, because one goes hand in hand. And I'm just giving a long explanation for transparency purposes, because I know the Orlando Sentinel's here and things like that. And to me, the process is just as important as the outcome, and that's why we came to the conclusions that we did. And so, it's about as good as we're gonna get, because we don't control the law enforcement agency. It's at the end of the day, we can't compel the sheriff, we can't compel the city of Kissimmee, we can't compel the St. Cloud. And at least we appreciate, for at least the next school year, our parents can know that the SROs are there on campus. And hopefully they can be there for longer, but we'll see what next year brings. I motion to approve as submitted unless anybody has any questions.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Ms. Sorry, I thought it was a comment. Motion to approve, item 1901 by Mr. Melendez, second by Mr. Bass. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. 9.2?
Yes.
Or 19.2, I apologize. It is late.
19.2, I was directed to prepare a resolution.
Yep, we've
which
read it.
expressed this board's position regarding SROs. And what I did was go through those recommendations that the board were in agreement with and put them in the resolution. There's no pride of authorship. Each thing was put in with a thought, and I can explain it if you have questions on them. And I do have one recommendation I spoke to Mr. Melendez about. I think if you approve this, that it should be sent not only to the chiefs and sheriffs, but to the city councils and the county commission, because ultimately they truly have the authority or the ability to impact, and I think they should clearly know the board's position on this serious issue.
Okay. Mr. Arguello, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, two, I'd like to change paragraph 4, or the third whereas, to state that this official request recognizing that it is unclear as to whether the school district may compel the sheriff and so on. And then I asked that Frank ask for an opinion from the Attorney General on this issue. Secondly, I would like to say that to me, this resolution, although very well written, Frank, is not strong enough for me. I think that this is a travesty that has as much attention as it has gotten. It's not enough. I think that our charter schools and most importantly, the kids that attend charter schools have been victimized by this decision completely unnecessarily. I do appreciate that this is one thing that the board was together on doing. So I'd like to motion to pass this resolution with that change in language, and then the request that our attorney seek an Attorney General opinion on the matter.
And I'm fine with that, Madam Chair. He reviewed that with me prior to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Melendez, you have a comment?
Yes, and again, the resolution, I understand it's non-binding, and I almost should have said it here. The other thing that I'm somewhat disappointed at is the fact that during our conversations, the chiefs were saying that it's not a financial thing, it's a timing thing. At one point, they're like, even Mike Stagwell, the city of Kissimmee city manager, said, hey, we can get you more funding. And then I remember, Chief Odell said, well, it's not just about the money, it's about the timing. You gotta recruit the people and then you gotta come in and do it. And so I just find it extremely disappointing that, and again, I should have brought it up at the last one, but we're increasing our allocation from 43,000 to 46. So if the issue was money, so they kind of like beat us down and took more money out of us because they said on record that it's not a funding thing, it's a staffing issue. So yet, we're paying more money for every single school, and yet funding wasn't an issue. And so, and I don't want to put that in a resolution because that's what it is. So I guess I'm just saying it now for the record that, at least for myself, I'm disappointed that they're getting more money out of us, going on the record saying money wasn't the issue, it was a staffing issue.
Thank you.
And then, the last thing too is, last thing, just like to be done, Belago Academy is being charged as a charter school, and yes, technically it's a charter school, but it's managed by the school district. It's not managed by an outside agency.
Mr.
We run it.
Melendez, and it is late, but
Yes,
you're
okay.
speaking on an item we've already voted on.
Okay.
Which
that's
is,
good.
we can absolutely, have the discussion later. I'm asking if we have a second for item 19.02
I second approve 1902
With the amended language.
with the amended
with the
language.
amended language.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Arguello, a second by Mr. Melendez to approve item 19.02 with the amended items. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Frank?
Yes, this is just to alert you, on August 3rd, we will have on the issue single-member districts, which have to be done this year. And the reason we're alerting you now is the county is in the process of putting together, I understand, a committee, et cetera. And by August 3rd, we should have more details regarding that issue and be able to better discuss it with you. But I wanted you to know it's out there.
Okay, I saw Mr. Arguello first and Mr. Melendez.
Yeah, I have a recommendation for this. I'm in the minority here, we're in the minority, just in general politically. However, I think that it would behoove the school district to create a joint committee with the Osceola County Commission and the other municipalities and and then assign people to those committees to make sure that we have single member districts that actually represent their communities and that make sense in the drawings. So I think that this is a place, I would like to recommend myself to sit on this committee and then, like I said, establish a committee that we work in cohesively with the other municipalities and governmental agencies to establish these single member districts.
Thank you. Mr. Melendez?
I have a different take on that, with all due respect. I believe in the House and the Senate, they create their budgets and they create a conference committee. I believe the school district should be able to create its own internal map first, you know what I'm saying? And, cause I sat on redistricting 10 years ago, that's how old I am, you know what I mean? I was actually around when we did that. And we thought it was in the best interest, to what John is saying, that the county commission and the school district try to line as best as possible so the precinct numbers line up and you don't get voters confused. Like District 4 means District 4 for both the county and the city, the school board. But there's a lot of, civil rights issues, there's a lot of fair districts and things like that. I think it's best for us to have our own internal committee, with staff or maybe an outside consultant to drop what we believe. Let the county develop what they believe and then have a joint, and I don't think it should even be a committee, the joint should be the entire board. Because that's how important it is, because it impacts every single one of us. So that'd be kind of my amendment to John's idea. I like the idea of a joint committee, but it's an entire, like with the impact fees, all 5 of us need to be there. And all 5 county commissioners need to be able to hash it out together. So
Madam
I think,
Chairman.
if they desire to do that.
That's why this item will be on the 3rd. There's no action requested tonight.
Right.
Because I don't even know what the county's done already. And so that is.
Because I don't want to be
something that
hogtied
you
to
should
what
be
the county
digesting.
does. I think we should be able to draw up our own concept, and then the county draws up the concept, and then we have a joint intergovernmental meeting, just like we want to do with impact fees, which I believe, I know it got pulled, but I think that's the consent, right, Dr. Pace? Is for us to meet together with the county and kind of discuss what the final impact fee, advisory is, or?
That is something that I failed to bring up in that part of my presentation, but I was gonna ask the board if they would like for us to schedule.
I'll bring it up during new business then. I'll bring it up, but the point is, I just think that's the appropriate process, and we don't have to vote on it now, but I just think that, we are our own body, we could create our own, because at the end of the day, let's say we totally disagree, then we create our own map and we don't have to go together with the county. But I think it would behoove us to waive our authority to do what we can do, it's statutorily, which is we're allowed to create our own maps.
Thank you.
Frank, what's our
Mr.
deadline?
Arguello?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I agree that it would be best if we drew our own maps. And I know you're not supposed to say this in polite company, but the fact is we're in a minority political position regardless. So the maps are gonna be drawn regardless the way that they want to be done. So
No, they don't. The school district has the authority to draw its own map regardless of what the county does.
I'm
This
talking
is
about
like
you and
impact.
I. So you and I are in a
I don't think that this
I'm
is
not
the
talking
same
about
conversation. The conversation is about single
but-
district members. I feel like we
Yeah.
voted together more times than we don't. So you saying that you're in the minority is a little bit of a stretch, but that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. However,
Can
back
I
to the
continue my statement,
conversation
though?
at hand. Well, I was gonna recognize Mr. Bass.
Well, no, let him finish.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
His comment.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that in the end, the maps are not gonna be drawn the way I were to believe. So it would be best to avoid the lawsuits that we would be involved in and take that up as a larger issue because we will have a lawsuit, the county will have a lawsuit, the cities will have a lawsuit, and everybody will be individual. If we come to a committee together, then it would probably be an easy way forward and without as much contention over something that is really, in the end, it's in the hands of the voters, in the hands of the community, and I trust that regardless of where the lines are drawn, that the community will make the right choices, so.
I'm sure I have some other items.
1 second, please. Are you settled, Mr. Arguello?
I'm done.
Thank you. May I please recognize Mr. Bass, who was next?
I just was gonna ask you what is the deadline? Have they set the deadline on when those districts have to
We
be
really
drawn?
gotta get everything in place. I think we concluded by October. We have to be, the
You have to give us the
consultants
data.
working on this, et cetera.
So the consensus data, as the consultant said earlier, is coming in later. So I'm actually waiting to see what the extension date is. It may have just a little longer than we thought, but it is going to come fast and pretty quick, but all of this has to be done and finalized.
And I don't want you to think, I don't like to use the word minority at this board because I don't feel that you are in a minority because I know the district's gonna be redrawn, our county is growing and then has to be restructured because, my district is too big, it's growing. And I see some lines drawn that's gonna pull some from 5 over to maybe over to the BBL district. That's just common sense. But maybe the county and their committee are gonna draw the lines that would be acceptable by us. I don't know. I don't even know who sits on the committee. I don't even know who draws the maps.
I think Rhonda, in fact, my old memory, I'm a little old, like 10 years ago, I think Rhonda was one that kind of drew maps for us last time, or at least some preliminaries, and we looked at them.
So what we did last time is we did join up with the county. Each county commissioner had elected, I believe, or put 2 people per district on that committee, and then we worked with the supervisor of elections office. Since all the census data came into the county, we worked through their GIS department, which is Ken Brown. Of course, it's all based on population. And then one of the reasons we went along with them is the county had just gone through a lawsuit and we wanted to avoid going through the same lawsuit. So our lines are just slightly different, but they pretty much mirror because of overall population.
So on the 3rd, trying to move this along, we will have a more in-depth discussion on this, and as we get information, we'll pass it on.
Thank you. Board, anything else
I do have a number.
about this item?
Are we not voting on this?
Just tabling this for now.
There's no voting. Okay, yes.
Madam Chair, we have a termination appeal that has come up, that is deadline, and I would need the board to have a meeting either on Monday or Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. It'll last at the most an hour or 2, at which time you will sit as the appeal body for that matter.
I remember those.
Don't we have something on Tuesday of next week?
I'm sorry to backtrack, but the 1903 is an action item, so it has to have either a vote to approve or a vote to table.
Oh, it is an action item?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thought it was
So
just
you approve
information.
my report, that would be the motion.
We're approving the information that you just gave us. Okay. I will,
I don't wanna give you any affirmation, Frank, no, I will approve, and I will motion to approve 1903.
Second.
have a motion by Mr. Arguello, a second by Mr. Melendez to approve item 19.03. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0, and so we are back to 19.04. So yes, please continue.
Yes, so we need to have this hearing. You need to sit as an appellate body and to meet the timeframes. We need to unfortunately go Monday or
Is that an
Tuesday
action
morning.
item that we vote, or can we send an email and say, hey, when are times available?
It's listed.
As a reminder, on Tuesday, we have our State of Education breakfast at 7 out at Embassy Suites.
So it'd be Monday.
And on Monday,
Rehearsal.
some of you were gonna stop by the new teacher
Oh,
orientation.
could we have the State of Education, since we're all gonna be there? Can we go to
Does it
lunch?
have to be at 8 a.m.?
No.
Yeah, can we schedule like say 1 o'clock, so 7:30 to 11,
if I'm already going to
we're
be
already
off
at
that
Embassy
day,
Suites, we got the whole board
Might
and
as well
everybody there.
just do it.
Right, because we'll send notice to the employee tomorrow. So 1 o'clock, or do you want 1:30 to be safe?
And we're meeting here.
Yes, you'll sit in here.
Are we approving that we've approved that we're coming?
No.
It's listed as an action item.
Then you are approving, please.
We're approving Tuesday,
Tuesday.
I have motion to approve Tuesday the 20th at 1:30 to conduct a special hearing for termination
At what time, I'm sorry?
at 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Melendez, a second by Mr. Bass, right, 19.04 to have a termination hearing at 1:30. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Do you have comments?
I have 4 more items to touch on quickly, I'm sorry, but.
What? I don't see that on the agenda. I think you're done.
This is the longest
done.
meeting, like really nice. I don't have my son
These
here.
are real upset, these are real quick.
Nothing on my agenda.
This is reports. St. Cloud came up with, they want to buy a piece of property from us. It's by legal interpretation, we have the ability to do the appraisal without having the board vote to do the
Oh, is
appraisal.
that that little piece of property off Mulkey Road that we talked about before?
And so we're doing that to give you that info. Rhonda and I are gonna meet with the county attorney's office to talk issues we have from a technical standpoint with the impact fee ordinance, to try and have the staffs align that we think protect us better. I've mentioned this to the chairman, I'll ask it when he gets back, to schedule a workshop where I would like to go over the board policy, the state statutes, and the rules regarding the authority and responsibilities that you each have and hold as a board member.
I love that.
And to clarify it, and if you don't agree with something, then I'm gonna ask the board to decide what the policy is, all right? Please. Yeah.
I was late.
Gonna have I've asked the chair to schedule a workshop where we can sit and I can review the statutes, the board policies, everything as to the roles, responsibilities, and authority of board members. So if there is a disagreement among the board on an interpretation, I'm then gonna ask the board to settle that there because it would make us all a lot.
How much time are you reserving for that?
Honestly, a couple hours.
Make sure that we do have a conversation, a statute-led conversation as well.
I'm
Not
gonna be
just
going
policy,
right
but-
through the statutes, then I'm gonna be going through the written policies, et cetera. I mean, you're gonna have it right in writing, everything that we're going through, okay?
Thank you.
The last one I would tell you, just a very good shout out to staff. The board at the last meeting talked about customer service at the health clinic. We had a very, let's say, honest Dr. Page position with Pather. They will be getting a letter from me, which you'll see, putting them on 30 days notice. Dr. Pace told them they had 30 days to fix every issue. And if there is not a fix and we see that we're not happy, it will then be that we'll come forward to resolve that and talk to the board. Okay?
Thank you.
And with that, I am happy to say I don't have another thing to say tonight.
Oh, okay, well, it's only 9:04. Okay, we do not have any unfinished business, but we do have some new business with regards to personnel and HR systems. Is that Mr. Arguello?
Yes, please. Okay. So in our last meeting, I think we had some discussions on HR. Since that meeting, revolving around one district employee. So I started to just ask them some questions, general questions about situations that didn't seem to align with what the board and staff were telling me. So in that time frame, at the same time, I also received a variety of anonymous letters from the public, basically telling me situations where this was not the case or where we were not following the protocol or the policy or so on. And so I want to make a comment about it. One, it's disheartening that if nothing else, the perception that the public has is that we are a district that operates on favoritism and cronyism. So when one person says something and then somebody starts sending me anonymous letters, then obviously it says something. Also, I want to point out that our human resources chief explicitly answered a question at a workshop to our vice chair, and that answer was to the question of, do we do exit interviews? And our chief human resource officer said, we do exit interviews, and spoke about it in detail. So there was somebody who just left the district, and they spoke to me, they provided me a litany of issues that they had in HR and so on. But at the same time, I just happened to ask that person, did you receive an exit interview? And he said, no, it was not an option. And I said, maybe you should ask to go get an exit interview then. I'm not sure that happened or not, but the fact is that we are not performing exit interviews. And this was somebody who actually had a lot of interest in executing an exit interview. So, number one, we need to be doing exit interviews because it happens to be a valuable resource according to the desire of the vice chair herself, who mentioned it, who asked about it. And I thought that was a pretty dishonest response in retrospect after having spoken to this person. Secondly, for a $1.3 billion organization to not have a system of record keeping that is appropriate to me is absolutely unacceptable. So I posed the following requests to our human resources. May I have a list of all the personnel working in central offices of the district, their job descriptions, when their jobs were advertised, and what their current salaries are in their most recent evaluation. I would also like a report on the percentage, everyone who, and in what respect personnel does not meet the job requirements of their current position. Also, who has been hired for a position they were not qualified for, or when a job description or requirement was changed to allow an individual to apply or be hired. So essentially what that does is it makes sure that when we have someone and we hire them under a contingency to fulfill an X requirement that they don't have at that time, that we do. But apparently we don't have the system that actually tracks that people are doing the things that they have to do in order to have the job that they have, or the title that they have to have, that they do have. So I want to point out that number one, it's not any particular person that I have an issue with. It's the system that allows for the perception that people are very disturbed by. And I want to address one issue. At the last meeting, I was called, somebody mentioned that I was bullying. So I took that to heart and I thought about it. And perhaps maybe the approach seemed to be bullying in nature. However, if anyone else at this board meeting were receiving the number of complaints and the anonymous reports and the number of people who have been reaching out to me, right, complaining about the issues in HR, I feel it's my job to advocate for those people who are coming to me and saying that this is not a fair place to work, or you cannot get ahead because of these perceptions that you have. So I would just like to clear the air here. We absolutely need to make it clear that this is a place for, and this is the response I received when I made my records request. We do not maintain such information. Date central office personnel specific positions were advertised, report on percentage, everyone who, and in what respect personnel does not meet job requirements of their current position. Who has been hired for a position they were not qualified for, when a job description or requirement was changed to allow an individual to apply or be hired. So why are we not tracking this information? A $1.3 billion organization has records on their employees to make sure that they are meeting the standards set forth by the board. Here we don't, apparently. Here what we're doing is we allow anybody to get in according to whatever reason put them there, right? Whether it's favoritism or not. And then we don't track it any further. And we just allow it to go into the ether and allow it to disappear and dissipate, and then no one can track it. When I made my public records request for other employees, I was given partial records, and then on top of those partial records, the next meeting, I believe, we received an agenda item that said we were going to start destroying records of all sorts. I go through that list of records that were being destroyed, and it was like a whole bunch of human resources records too that I didn't think were appropriate to be destroyed. To me, I think that we need to change the perception of the 8,000 employees of this district so that they know that this is a fair district to work in, so that they know that they're being chosen, elevated, promoted, raised according to their merits, and not one based on favoritism. I don't think that's too much to ask for, and if that's bullying in nature, then I'm going to continue to do that, because the fact is that there's a lot more people than one person here that sits in this room that feel bullied. And it's not fair that 8,000 people feel bullied so that we don't fix the problems here behind the dais. So that was my comment on that. What I would like to do is, I would like to motion to have a review by RSM of our, just a deep test of our hiring, promoting, raising practices by our internal auditor.
Okay.
I don't know if you need to vote on that. The RSM just asked for input and they just.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, they did just ask us for it, but did you bring that up to them?
I
as one
did,
of the
absolutely, yep.
So if they bring it up, they bring it up.
Well, but what happens is they bring it up to the audit committee and then the audit committee brings it up to us. But there's nothing that says that the audit committee approves that or that the board will. So what I'm saying publicly right now, to me, it would be a great practice for us to show, for us to allow RSM to go into a deep dive into our human resource practices and for us to vote and allow the 8,000 employees of this district to have confidence in our processes.
Okay. I guess I misunderstood when I had my meeting with them. They were asking specifically soliciting for ideas of things that we can focus on. I didn't know that there was a barrier to what they actually research, Dr. Pace?
No.
There is,
They're putting together a multi-year risk plan, getting everybody's concept of what are the risks, to put it together, bring it to the committee, and then ultimately the board's gotta decide what that plan is. You put something in, take something out, but the board decides that and controls that, because it's your fiduciary duty that they're checking. So that's what happens.
walk me through that process one more time, please.
RSM is doing what all auditors do. They're putting together a risk assessment plan based upon input from this board, the superintendent, CFO, different departments, myself, and then based upon all that input, coming up with what we think is the highest risk, next, what we ought to do.
Right, so they're
That's
weighting it.
then brought to the audit committee to look at, and then it's brought to the board. Ultimately, the board makes the decision. The audit committee doesn't have the ability to not have you see what RSM has recommended. It's gonna be coming to you.
So
They may have input like, well, we'd rank this 2 or 3, but they don't get to dictate to you what that plan is gonna be.
So to be clear, if we have a list from the audit committee that suggests something that makes suggestions and we wanted to add something additional to that, we are within our authority to do so.
Absolutely, you can chuck it out and say, no, this is our list. You can do anything you want with that list.
Or change the priority.
Priorities and say, no, we want HR now. We don't want it a year from now.
So do you want to amend your motion, John, to be more clear of where, because it's obviously can be an auditable item. Do you want to change it on the queue? Is what it is?
No, what I would like to
The
do
next item
is,
reviewed or third or?
no, I think that I would like the board right now to vote on whether or not we assign RSM, the HR practices, a deep dive into our HR practices, to put that onto their list right now.
But aren't we able to add our own items?
That we do that here. But this is where it's
They
placed.
specifically asked for our input, I'm
Right.
confused.
It's significant to Mr. Arguello where he wants RSM to know the whole board wants it
And it's like comes higher.
on the item and come up with the plan of when you can do it.
Frank, it is the board that assigns RSM their duties, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this would be the
Let me
appropriate
ask the
place.
The superintendent has the authority to ask, in addition to RSM, I want you to check this. Do you follow me? That type, which at any time, the superintendent may go, I want to look at this issue for me as a superintendent. But that doesn't mean that your issues get bounced. It just means there's another thing to do. So I think what I'm hearing you say is you want RSM to understand that that is a board priority. Am I misinterpreting what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, you're misinterpreting what he's?
What I would like to do is for the board to take action by
requesting
RSM begin the process of doing a deep dive into our HR practices.
And that's his motion. He'd like them to be told
So I
start
have a
now.
motion on the floor,
Second.
and I have a motion by Mr. Arguello and a second by Mr. Melendez to, let me get this correct, direct RSM to do a deep dive into our HR practices. Did I get that correct, team?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're not asking him to do anything that they wouldn't do normally had we, Mr. Arguello could have asked them to do that regardless.
No.
No.
You don't have, he could ask them, but they have no authority to do anything unless this board asks for it. It's one of the things we're gonna, no board member has the authority to ask any employee to do anything or to ask any consultant to do anything. They have to basically have the board direct Dr. Pace. Now, within that, everybody understands you might call and ask for an answer to a question. We're not talking about that.
Wait a minute, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Again, I remember having this meeting and this is specifically something that they were already looking at. Isn't this something that they were already looking at?
No, it's not on their agenda, no.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I thought you were looking at me.
First of all, I apologize because I didn't make it clear that I was speaking to Dr. Pace, so I apologize on that end. Is this not something that because I just had this conversation with them this week. There were top items, HR was at the top of their list.
I have not seen the most recent list. I haven't met with RSM yet to hear what the board's priorities have been identified.
Well, I just spoke with them, so if this is the case, if they're already doing it, fine, we
I
can go
met with
right ahead.
RSM today with Sarah.
Yeah.
HR has been identified as a high priority. Nobody has directed them, go do an audit on HR.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
Ms. Castillo, you're not incorrect in your
okay, I'm
understanding.
like, wait, I had this conversation with them.
That is the normal
Okay.
process, is that they will have risk assessment interviews with each of you and with key members of staff to then prioritize a top 10 list of what they feel based on the conversations is a draft of the top 10 risk areas. Then there's additional conversation with the audit committee where they can weigh in, reprioritize, add their thoughts, things that should be removed or added. Ultimately, that will come to the school board to accept. And one other thing I just want to clarify, once those specific topics are identified, if this being one that you all choose to approve to move forward with tonight, RSM will then put together a scope of work with a budget that will come back to this board to approve at that time. They're not gonna go like start the work tomorrow based
Sure,
on
no,
this.
of course.
You're gonna want, what's the scope of work, how many hours are we expecting this to take, and a dollar amount that this board is approving for that scope of work.
Okay, so my opinion on this, they've already, I don't know if you all have had conversations with them, this was already part of what they were going to be doing, so I don't think that this motion is doing anything that they wouldn't do either way, so it's fine.
So they would do it anyways.
Right. At least, I don't know what conversations you've had, but at least based on this, that has
Now
already,
confusing me
HR has
now.
already been identified as one of the top items.
But they have not,
They just need direction, right?
they need direction
Okay,
for
so
you to move forward on it.
I have a motion, I have a second. Are we ready to vote, or did you have, I know you had a comment.
It's just getting late, I just don't, I mean, is this something that it's typically done? I mean, have we had this type of audit done in the past? Is it something
Well,
that's,
the board has the authority.
that's the question I
I've
asked, is
seen,
it we?
well, I'm trying to give you
No.
the authority to do it, and in the past,
We've done
boards
we've done
have
it
asked
this
for an
We've done it
audit.
on construction audits. I remember when I was back on the board,
Yeah.
and it was actually RSM that did it as well. So we instructed them to do a deep dive on construction contracts and payouts and things like that. So it has been done before in the past. Because that's what an auditor is for.
I guess my only.
That's the role of the auditor.
And I apologize, we're just like all over the place now because it's so late. But I guess my only additional question is, they have already identified these items. How would they have just brought that to us in a meeting and we would have just approved them at that point?
No, I think Mr. Arguello is just requesting to go ahead and identify upfront right now, this is definitely going to be priority one area that we want addressed this year.
Okay.
Instead, because it may be listed, but
Mr.
it's
Arguello, please correct me if I
And
missed
we might get to like that's why I was asking that question earlier, what is the priority of it? Because, it may be on the list, but it's number 5, and you gotta do 4 other audits before you get to it. It's about jumping in as the top of the list of the queue and say, this is the next one that we wanna direct it to.
I'm good.
Good, okay. So we have a motion, let's go ahead and just take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 4-0. And board member comments? Are we good?
No, there's a couple that I have to do, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Because one of them is with Dr. Pace, and that is, we had a discussion about the impact fees, because some of the county commissioners were having those discussion with us about the whole square footage, that one weird item. So instead of us coming to a conclusion independent of the county, the recommendation was, which I agree, and I'm gonna, I guess, make a motion now, that we have an intergovernment meeting with the county and have that discussion at the same time, so we're all clear on what the definition of that single unit is, the hotel conversions, because I know Commissioner Churju was telling me about, the county's thinking about creating a new zoning definition. And so I don't want that conversation to be independent of the school district, that we kind of understand each other's terms and definitions.
Okay.
If the board would like, I will work with your calendars to try to schedule an intergovernmental meeting to discuss the impact fee study.
Could I just ask?
So, I don't know if that's a motion or is it just a head
I
nod?
just need consensus.
Okay.
And there's one agenda item I want you to talk about, and that is, we learned today that they're dealing with a 3,000 unit plus low-income area, but the county's planning on, but they're not doing anything to set aside and assure their schools. So we gotta talk with them about their planning and looking out for the school children.
Okay.
On a light note though, because I had two more things, this light note, there's a couple back to school events, because I noticed that you did one also, and I'm gonna be hosting one as well. And I talked to Dr. Pace about it. A lot of these kids that are getting back to schools also need like Title I services, and they may not know about it. So she was just, because I wanted to have somebody there from Title I department, whoever it is, to kind of, be there to hand out information and to inform parents. And she was like, hey, we needed school board direction because it's on a Saturday, it's not on a regular weekday. And it has to be available to anyone. So if anyone has any back to school programs that, it's not favoring one board member or another, that all board members, if they choose to get staff, that we can have some staff there to educate parents on what's available to them as fit transition. So we just need direction. I guess it's not a vote, but a head nod if it's okay.
Get the information out to the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that, but
I would like to request an executive session after our August 3rd meeting for the purposes of discussing our labor negotiations moving forward.
okay.
So we do have the yes on the back to school. And the last thing, which is, I know but we talked about it earlier, and I can delay it for later to have a formal discussion, but we talked about the process about having environmental come first. And I found out that environmental is not on the continuing service contract. We always hire a civil engineer and they go out there and environmental is a part of it. I think environmental needs to be its own continuing service contract. So when we look at a new vacant land, we see if there's any Gulf services or anything first before we bore into the land and spend money testing the land. Because when I talked to an environmental engineer, his name is Austin from Austin Engineering, and he said, Julius, we'll tell you from the very beginning whether or not it's even developable. So don't waste your time boring into land that's not even developable, it's not even a wetland. So I just think that's something that the school district should consider, and we don't have to do it now, we'll discuss it later. I just wanna give you like a sneak peek of what's coming up later, is that environmental should be its own continuous service contract, just like we have with architects and things like that. And those should be a process for us when we buy new land, to automatically do environmental first before we do any other testing on the site.
You do that.
If I may just suggest, I think we've talked about the need for a facilities planning workshop to really talk about our processes, and I think that could certainly be included in that if you would like. So we can talk about
There's no rush, there's no pending.
when we first become aware of a project, what processes we go through, when the board wants to be notified and engaged in the process.
Perfect. You all settled, Mr.
Yes,
Melendez?
yes, ma'am, that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else have any final comments?
Yeah, I do. Regarding the comments that the gentleman, Mr. Martinez, made about an MBE program, I think that is a tremendous idea. In fact, I had a discussion with the Urban League about MBE program. So I would definitely like for discussions to occur about establishing an MBE program, perhaps with the Puerto Rican Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida, the Urban League, and the school district, and making sure that we are involving those companies.
Before we begin that, can I come, I've been involved in a lot of these things and they get challenged, is legal or not. Can I come back and lay out for you all what we have to do to assure we could, create one legally and defend it before we go off and get everybody going? Because they could go down that tangent and have me say, no, you can't do that. And I'd rather lay out the framework for you all and say, and candidly, when we did it in Orange, just so you know, we had the county, the airport, and the school board all do the thing, so everybody was the same. So if I can come back next meeting or in August, want to lay out for you, here's the thing, I think.
I'd like to see beforehand. I want to start those conversations with those organizations.
And the other one you will get asked, I will tell you, is a veterans one.
Absolutely, I think that should be included.
So I will get my research together that I've done before and come sit with you and go through it.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Bass?
Guys, I'm sorry you missed Jeopardy. On September 25th, the Guardian Ad Litem Gala, and we've always had representation there for the school district, and I don't think it'll be a problem, but I wanted to kind of get a consensus if we could have a table there for them.
Please get me the information and I'll make sure Abby follows up.
Okay.
And then if you're planning a school supply,
Yes, great.
if you're planning a school supply drive and you want staff there for a Saturday or an afternoon or evening event, Just please give me that date, the date, times and information, locations, so that I can get staff lined up.
Thank you. Okay, I do have a final item, very appropriate since we did have our legislative update today, team. I hope and trust that you have received an email from FSBA regarding submitting your focus, your advocacy focus or your wish list focus. This is a way for us to be able to participate in the process. So although I know you're not listening to me,
I'm looking right at you.
two seconds of your time.
Somebody's blowing up my phone.
I know, craziness. Please submit your advocacy requests by September 1st so that we can start working on them. You guys are so lucky that you have 2 representatives on the advocacy team on this board. You have Mr. Arguello and you have myself, so we definitely want to get to work with how we can advocate for public education. Anything else?
Yes, could you call my wife and let her know that I really was here?
We are adjourned.
I'm sure she won't be complaining for me.